Chapter 121. Bone Demon. Seeing the powerful burst of divine power, even the normally taciturn steel demon was shocked, exclaiming, "Priest!" Lancelot realized he somehow understood the demon's language, but he immediately knew he hadn't directly heard it. Instead, through his connection with Egmont, he grasped the meaning of the word the demon had uttered. The steel demon's surprise was understandable. If a priest was controlled by a succubus, they must already be on a path of corruption, and it would be impossible to receive any power from the divine. The present situation clearly defied logic, suggesting this team was not as the fiends had anticipated. The demons, who highly valued logic, planning, and strategy, were well aware of how severe the consequences could be if they misjudged their enemy's strength. Bruto and Paladin rushed to support Lancelot's fight as soon as they could. Faced with the dense skeleton sea, Bruto hesitated slightly, but still gritted his teeth and charged through. The dwarf's form easily passed through the illusions of skeletons, encountering no resistance. He shouted joyfully as he hurled his warhammer at a steel demon in front of Lancelot. Meanwhile, Paladin pulled out a scroll, ready to cast a spell to strike at the demons. The rest were slightly slower, but they soon reacted and ran toward Lancelot's side. Bruto's warhammer hit a steel demon right in the chest, knocking him back, but a wounded companion behind him caught and steadied him. The hammer spun back to Bruto's hand, and a noticeable dent appeared in the chest of the steel demon. Clearly, Bruto's strike had caused some damage, certainly more effective than Egmont's headbutt. Just as they were about to envelop the demons, an unexpected event occurred. The surrounding skeletons, previously illusionary, suddenly vanished, bringing smiles to everyone's faces. Yet, Paladin, as if remembering something, suddenly turned pale and shouted, "Be careful! High-level illusions require focused casting, there's..." He didn't finish his sentence when a wall of ice suddenly appeared, splitting the cave space in two. The ice wall was over 7 feet thick, stretching from the cave ceiling to the floor, and spanned from one side of the cave to the other. Aside from Lancelot, Bruto, Paladin, and a certain floating skull, the rest were blocked behind the ice wall. "Phil!" The werewolf grabbed the goblin. "It's finally time for your bombs to be useful. Blow this ice wall up for me." "I know. Put me down!" Phil shouted. "Let's move over there, we don't want to hurt them. Listen, I need you to make a few holes in the ice wall." On the other side of the ice wall, Lancelot finally pinpointed the position of the spellcaster based on the resurgence of magical fluctuations. He moved swiftly, deploying an extremely bizarre footwork technique, dragging several after-images, and darted lightning fast towards a large boulder at his front right, while the steel demons could not block him in time. Just as a puzzle solver finally figures out the solution, he was certain that the source of his unsettled spirit perception, the one who summoned the skeleton sea and the ice wall, and the elusive demon spellcaster, was hiding behind that stone. Faced with the obstructing boulder, Lancelot did not ponder whether to bypass it from the left or the right. He raised his great sword high, powered by innate true chi, and executed the King Yin sword art, striking directly at the boulder. If the performance of the King Yin sword art was underwhelming against metal armor, against rock, the wood attribute of the King Yin sword art displayed its formidable power. The large rock, like a radish, was cleaved into two by Lancelot's sword, and the demon hiding behind it had not anticipated an attack from this angle. The invisible sword aura extended the range of the attack, giving the demon no chance to dodge. However, this demon had a large body, and more than half of its length was comprised of a tail. Lancelot's sword had chopped off its tail but failed to injure the creature's body. The tailless demon let out a wretched scream, and in extreme pain, it burst forth with incredible speed, darting behind the steel demons. The newly appeared demon looked like a skinned giant, standing 10 feet tall. Its dried flesh tightly clung to its remaining skeletal frame. Its enormous skull had an oversized occiput, giving it an exceptionally eerie and terrifying appearance. Bones extended directly from the tips of its fingers, forming sharp claws that could undoubtedly shred flesh effortlessly, and it had insect-like translucent wings on its back. Find your next adventure on Empire. Every vertebrae of its spine was equipped with huge bone spurs, protruding from the flesh, with the longest ones measuring about a foot. However, its sharp, spiked tail, which ended with a beak-like tip, was now lying at Lancelot's feet, resembling a giant snake with its head chopped off. A succubus of the good alignment. This giant demon let out an unbearable, bone-grating screech, which Egmont translated in real time without delay. "Boss, this is an Osai demon, also called a bone demon. It seems they are middle-rank demon spellcasters, possessing the ability to instantly see through a creature's true nature. the skeleton intensely stared at the demon. I don't know why, but seeing it just irks me. Hey! You, the skeleton frame over there! Ekmund yelled carelessly at the demon, what's that thing on your butt? Does it mean that you never wipe after you do your business, and it just clumps up like that? The provoked demon immediately raised its hand, and a green acid arrow flew toward Ekmund, who dodged it with a strange laugh. This movement acted like a signal, and both sides clashed again. Bruto and Lancelot charged from left and right, while Ekmund, using his nimble stature, bypassed the front-line steel demons and headed straight for the bone demon. But the fastest was Paladin. He unfolded a scroll that had been prepared for some time, drew magic power from the magic net into the arcane symbols on the scroll, forming a purple ray that directly hit a steel demon. Lancelot immediately noticed the enemy's change. The steel demon that was struck by the ray seemed slightly weakened, causing his heart to leap with joy. Paladin, however, slightly frowned. This was a first circle spell ray of enfeeblement, and its effect seemed less than expected, but that was unavoidable. All Bartes demons have a strong resistance against spells. He reached for another ray of enfeeblement scroll, ready to try again on another enemy, but suddenly, an unbearable metallic friction sound interrupted the scholar's casting. The steel demons were collectively moving their bodies rhythmically, causing their armor to rub against each other, producing that horrendous noise. The sound was so irritating that Paladin wished he could tear up the scroll he was holding and stuff it in his ears just to block out this terrible noise, utterly unable to focus enough to cast his spell. Chapter 122. Lancelot immediately formed a soundproof barrier spell, casting it over the steel demons. This minor divine skill of a chi refinement realm cultivator could only block the spread of sound, allowing Paladin, who stood at a distance, to no longer be affected by the noise. However, the steel demons within the barrier were oblivious to the change. As such, Lancelot, who needed to fight at close quarters, naturally had to continue enduring the annoying noise. But he had nothing to complain about. Such noise might make it difficult for spellcasters to concentrate and wield magic, but it wasn't enough to stop a warrior from wielding his weapon. If anything, it was inspiring greater destructive power within him, eager to smash the source of this irritating noise into smithereens. Bruto seemed to have entered into such a state. The earlier battle with skeletons was more like a game to him, but the antics of this group of steel demons truly enraged him. He and Lancelot charged at two steel demons, one on the left and the other on the right. Lancelot left the one with a dent on its breastplate to the dwarf warrior, focusing himself on the other opponent who was still in perfect condition. The frenzied dwarf held up his shield and rushed at the steel demon with relentless force. But the demon was far more composed than the dwarf. The steel demon violently swung its great sword, delivering a mighty blow that struck Bruto's shield, not only stopping the dwarf's charge but also pushing him back several steps, taking him out of attack range once more. The dwarf spat out a mouthful of blood-stained saliva at the steel demon, which was deftly avoided, and charged again, hammer in hand. On the other side, the steel demon facing Lancelot had clearly learned from its companion's mistake. Its great sword danced impenetrably, clashing with Lancelot in several bouts, leaving the knight no chance to strike. But Lancelot knew he couldn't count on Ekmund to hold off the bone demon for long, and the sword moves in his hand suddenly changed. He raised his long sword high, feigning another sequence of heavy slashes that had grievously wounded another steel demon earlier. The opponent, clearly impressed by the move, hastily assumed a defensive posture and anxiously called for backup from its comrades. Lancelot's first strike came down as fast as lightning, and despite adequate preparation, the terrifying strength still forced the steel demon into a kneeling position on the ground. The other two steel demons, poised for action, drew nearer, extending their weapons to assist their comrade against the following two slashes. But Lancelot naturally wouldn't comply with the demon's wishes. In fact, their reaction was entirely within his expectations, and one trick of battle is to surprise the enemy. The heavily sprung longsword didn't reverse direction in mid-air as it had before, forced by his immense power. This time, Lancelot followed the longsword's momentum, drawing a half-circle in mid-air, and continuing his attack with an unexpected upper slash. Such a follow-up attack wasn't especially swift. Under normal circumstances, blocking this kind of strike would be no difficult feat. But due to the predetermined impression he had left in the minds of the steel demons, the opponents had no inkling of such a transformation. Find exclusive stories on Empire. Alas, such are demons, they act bound by rules and laws, always methodically carrying out tasks. At least this holds true for low-rank demons, believing there is a pattern to everything, and subconsciously expecting their enemies to do the same. And at this moment, the steel demon paid the price. Its raised weapon was too late to block Lancelot's sword blade swinging up from below, and while it sought to dodge, its two comrades behind it were pushing against its back to block a second downward strike that didn't exist, with their great swords pressing down on its shoulders from either side. Lancelot's sword-wielding figure was too impactful, not to mention he was in the form of a succubus, causing everyone to be involuntarily drawn to his movements. Time seemed to slow down at this instant, as Bruto, Paladin, Ekmund, and all the demons watched Lancelot's great sword continuously approach the steel demon's body, ultimately penetrating the demon's flesh. The sound of steel tearing erupted, and the steel demon let out a piercing scream that struck at the core of all living beings. Lancelot kicked his opponent, pulling away and increasing the distance between them. The steel demon was close to passing out, only remaining standing because the two comrades behind it propped it up. Lancelot's strike had added a full foot to the demon's leg length. Even with the demon's constitution, such a grievous wound entirely robbed it of its combat ability. The demons intended to swap positions again, allowing the one with a light injury on its waist from Lancelot's sword to take the front again, but Lancelot no longer had time to tangle with this group of wounded soldiers, for his peripheral vision had caught sight of a skull getting brutally beaten, looking as if it would fall apart at any moment. His hand pinched a spell, and the true chi within his body surged in a specific pattern before being released. Suddenly, a mass of vines burst from the ground beneath the huddled steel demon's feet, entangling the demons tightly in place. Magician! The demons finally collapsed. What exactly was this situation? A succubus using a great sword instead of a whip, possessing the strength of a giant, and midway through a fight casting magic that could manipulate plants, a power normally wielded only by nature-loving druids, was simply too much for the demons that detested any unpredictability. Lancelot silently expressed his sympathy for the enemy in his heart, but his hands did not stop moving. His true chi instantly shifted to the technique of gathering chi slash, his body spun around, and he hurled his great sword at the bone demon. The bone demon, which was distractedly observing the fight, panicked as its soul seemed to leap out of its body. It hurriedly tried to dodge but, without its tail, its sense of balance was severely damaged, and Lancelot's thrown great sword, as swift as a javelin, struck the base of the bone demon's wings on its back regardless of its evasive attempt. The glacier, heavier than an average great sword and containing terrifying kinetic energy, lifted the large bone demon into the air and nailed it firmly to the wall. Meanwhile, Lancelot had already drawn Frost Slash strapped to his back, dashing forward like lightning. As the bone demon regained its senses from the shock, it lifted its head only to see the silhouette of a succubus raising a long sword, closing the distance at great speed. It stretched out its clawed hands, attempting to block the enemy's weapon, but the claws as hard as mithril were like decayed branches against the long sword in the hands of the succubus, effortlessly cut through. The last image that etched into its mind was a sword blade glowing with a bluish light, filling its entire vision. Chapter 123. Lancelot's sword fell, cleanly severing the ugly head of the bone demon from its neck. The energy that maintained the existence of the bone demon seemed to be extracted in an instant. Its shriveled flesh and exposed bones quickly lost color, then, like wood hollowed out from within, they couldn't sustain the body's strength and fell from the wall impaled by the glacier, turning into a pile of bones that seemed weathered over many years. The steel demons, witnessing the death of their charge, let out cries of despair and venomous curses. No! You have no right to kill it! Succubus! How dare you oppose Barto? Hell will take its revenge! We were about to achieve eternal victory, you can't change anything. Apart from Bruto's opponent, the remaining steel demons were tightly entangled by Lancelot's vines, unable to do anything. Normally, with their strength, it would not be difficult to break free from these vines, but these three steel demons had been somewhat injured. Paladin also ensured each one was hit by a weakening ray, completely depriving them of their ability to resist. The steel demon fighting Bruto wasn't faring any better. After losing the support of its companions, its strength seemed significantly weakened. Its legs were visibly deformed, and it appeared completely unable to move, barely managing to stand. Clearly, Bruto had targeted its knees extensively. The dwarf's condition seemed even more pitiful. Several noticeable gaps appeared on Bruto's shield, like a door chopped by an axe. His face was also covered with large patches of bruises, his left eye swollen nearly shut, and fresh blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. However, the dwarf himself seemed utterly unaffected by any setback, his hammer still swung swiftly and powerfully, and he was loudly singing a dwarf battle song that to Lancelot sounded not much better than the steel demons scraping their armor. The death of the bone demon clearly shook the steel demon's will to fight, it seemed to foresee the inevitable outcome of today, and its attacks became frantic, driven only by duty to continue fighting. Bruto now seized the enemy's subtle wavering. With his battered shield, he blocked a downward chop from his opponent, and the hesitant strength allowed the dwarf to swing his hammer full force at the steel demon's left knee. The knee of the steel demon let out a dull thud, the dwarf's hammer smashing it into a completely unstandable angle. It reflexively swung its great sword, trying to use its weapon to support its body. The attempt succeeded, but only for a brief moment. Bruto immediately knocked away the sword planted in the ground, and before the steel demon's body touched the floor, the dwarf's hammer struck the top of its head. The steel demon's helmet was indeed very sturdy, so this blow only made the helmet slightly dent, but the steel demon still died, as its whole head had been hammered into its chest cavity by Bruto. After all, what supports the armor is but a body of flesh. Bruto let out a joyous roar, celebrating his victory. He turned his head to look for the next enemy but suddenly found himself in a dilemma. The remaining 3 steel demons were tightly bound by the vines summoned by Lancelot, effectively making them prisoners. Facing these incapacitated enemies, Bruto had no interest in taking action. "Surrender," Lancelot declared expressionlessly, "and I can spare your lives." The response he received was the steel demon's laughter. "Ha ha ha, to think you expect us to surrender to Tannery. Do you believe we fear death?" Amid the steel demon's mocking laughter, their bodies began to burn. Before Lancelot could intervene, the demons had completely turned to ash, with the vines only clutching their now bodiless armor, the air still tinged with the smell of sulfur. With a wave of his hand, Lancelot made the vines disappear. The armor from the steel demons fell to the ground, and Bruto, curious, stepped forward to inspect it, finding the once immaculate armor reduced to a pile of useless lead, which rolled away with a light kick. "What is going on?" Lancelot frowned and asked, "I thought even fiends would fear death." "They are not truly dead," Paladin approached and explained, "all lower plane fiends can only be truly killed in their native planes. Those killed in other planes are reborn in their native plane with all their memories intact. Although it seems their power is not diminished, scholars speculate there must be some cost to such rebirth. The greatest cost is that they cannot re-enter the plane where they were killed for 99 years, Ekman floated over shakily. The process of rebirth is also extremely painful, similar to flaying and bone crushing, though in reverse order. However, for demons, that is not their greatest fear. Enjoy new chapters from Empire. You seem quite knowledgeable about the conditions in Barto Hell, Lancelot eyed him skeptically. Stop teasing and tell us the truth already, Paladin's face was full of curiosity. His expertise in abyss and demons left him with little knowledge about the demons of Barto Hell. However, as a deadly adversary in the Blood Wars, any information about demons could deepen his understanding of Tannery. What demons fear most is always one thing: degradation. The floating skull was very pleased to show off its knowledge. Demon society has a strict hierarchy, and almost all demons exhaust their cunning to climb higher, to revel in the delightful privileges and the thrill of tormenting those beneath them. This makes them fear degradation more than complete obliteration, which is often the punishment for failing important missions. At that moment, a loud explosion erupted behind them. The 3 turned around to see a huge hole blasted through the solid ice wall. Phil was striding through the hole with others, looking proud. "Achoo!" The goblin sneezed loudly. "Wow, this thing is really cold. Could you see anything from behind the ice wall, or is everything resolved?" "You can't imagine the amazing battle you missed," the floating skull boasted. "How many get the chance to see a succubus fight? The scene combined beauty, sexiness, gore, and violence. Missing that is a lifetime's regret." Boss, no offense, but right now, you're in the form of a succubus." "Pfft, we've seen that sort of thing many times already," Phil dismissed Ekman's bragging. "And what's that? A few steel demons, a bone demon?" "Once, Lady Tajana fought a Barlow flame demon on the ramparts of Twin Bridges town with a whip. Now that was something worth dying with no regrets. I'm going to report this conversation exactly as it happened." The werewolf's words fell like a bucket of ice water over the goblin, instantly rendering him mute. Chapter 124. However, why did the demons appear here? Lancelot frowned and asked. If they wanted to launch a surprise attack from here, they shouldn't have sent so few soldiers. Furthermore, with terrains like the slave enclosures, it would have been easier for them to attack the walls directly. Old Reap crouched on the ground, examining the skeleton left behind by the bone demon. Demons always engage in meticulous planning. These guys must have had some special purpose for coming to the bottom of this pit of corpses. Think about that ice wall, and how easily they summoned the skeleton. See. Paladin seemed to have realized something. Lancelot, you might have unintentionally saved Oasis Fort, sparing it from a fate of being overrun by demons. What did I do? Lancelot scratched his head. Was this bone demon some big shot or something? I don't know what kind of figure it was, but it was definitely a very powerful spellcaster, Paladin confidently stated. Think about how many skeletons there are in the pit. I guess it was preparing a very powerful spell that would awaken all the skeletons in the pit. Then an endless stream of skeletons would burst out of the slave enclosures, overwhelming every living being inside Oasis Fort. Lancelot smacked his lips. In a way, this kind of death is quite fitting for Molo and his Oasis Fort. Oh! Boss! What a deep irony this is! Ekmund exclaimed excitedly, the bodies of the slaves rising up to completely destroy the city that enslaved and murdered them. It's exactly the demon's style. The original plan must have been just like this. Don't get too happy too soon, the werewolf said gloomily. Demons are a bunch of creatures with a severe thirst for revenge, especially against those who hinder Barto-Hell in any way. You better be careful the next time you use this succubus identity. Thanks for the reminder, Lancelot nodded, though he thought to himself that he better wear this disguise whenever he did something big in the future. Having already plundered the treasure vaults of the succubus palace, completely looted Molo's treasure vault, and killed a succubus, a demon with a special status in Shendiravir, now he had also foiled the demon's plan. The bone demon, once resurrected in Barto-Hell, would surely exaggerate and report him, which now put him on the demon's radar. However, Fiend's ability to resurrect was really annoying, making it difficult to conceal his true strength. He would have to seriously research if there was a way to break this ability. Hey! Come and check this out! Kola was looking at a large rock that Lancelot had sliced open with his sword, and found the tail of the bone demon on the ground. Upon hearing this, everyone walked over only to see that the tail had not decayed like the rest of the bone demon's body but was still very firm and strong. I've never heard of such a phenomenon before, Dwarf Priest Wit spoke. What happened to this tail, and these two polished stones? That bone demon had been hiding behind this rock initially before I sliced its tail off with my sword. Lancelot shrugged nonchalantly, explaining the event plainly. Along with the rock, Ekmund added, Boss, that sword stroke won me over. My old man might be able to craft this tail into something, Bruto said, rubbing his eyes and adding, a lance, or a whip. Look at the thick vertebrae, and those sharp bone spurs on it. This tail is just beautiful. Ekmund moved closer. Boss, can you give this to me? For what? You want to piece together your own skeleton bit by bit? Bruto curiously looked at the skeleton. This thing seems pretty suitable for a spine. You could even have a tail. Find more adventures on Empire. I've never thought about it that way. The skeleton was stunned for a moment. That's actually a great suggestion, I'll consider it. I mean, I could use this thing as a weapon. It should be pretty effective. How do you plan to use this thing? Swinging it around with your mouth. Indeed, it has something to do with my mouth, but I'm not going to swing it. The skeleton head flew over, opened its mouth, and sucked the tailbone into its mouth, which was the entrance to the dimensional space within its body. Then, it brooded in the air for a moment and shouted loudly. Watch closely. All of a sudden, it opened its mouth wide, and the bone demon's tail shot out like a long spear, punching a large hole in the wall. How about that? Isn't it impressive? The skeleton head still had the tail stuck in its mouth, mumbling its words. It slurped the tail back in like noodles. Hey, it feels great, an attack bursting from the mouth like that can surely surprise the enemy during a fight. It's pretty disgusting watching you suck back that thick, long surprise, Bruto commented. Your move would be more effective up close, so you don't need to project such a long thing and then spend half a minute sucking it back bit by bit. Noted. Ekmund flew back to Lancelot's side. How about it, boss? Can I keep this thing then? Until I find a better use for it, you can use it, Lancelot nodded, then turned to look at Bruto. Are you all right? Alamir, can you heal him? I'll do it, let's not waste precious divine arts. Wit opened his backpack, pulling out bandages, potions, and other tools for treating wounds. Healing the sick and wounded is the responsibility of most priests, who usually receive good medical training, so they aren't caught off guard once they've used up their daily quota of divine arts. Apart from Bruto, the others had also sustained some minor injuries. Only Phil and Kola, the two small ones, were unharmed. After a quick treatment, the group resumed their journey to escape from the Oasis Fort. Worried that other demons might have entered the passage and could ambush them ahead, a common trick among demons, the group proceeded with extra caution, but fortunately, they encountered no trouble along the way. After walking for about an hour, by the dwarf's instinct, they were already close to the surface. Lancelot could feel it as well, as the air in the cave was starting to freshen, though using fresh to describe the air in a world devoid of plants wasn't quite accurate, but that was the general idea. Suddenly, old Reap sniffed the air, frowning as he warned. "There's a smell of blood ahead, be careful." "What a sensitive nose," Phil commented casually. The atmosphere suddenly quietened down, everyone staring at the forthright goblin, especially the werewolf old Reap, who squinted his eyes, dangerous fangs poking out from the corners of his mouth. I mean, what a sensitive nose, bro. What a sensitive nose, bro." Phil scrambled in his explanation, "Please, stop looking at me like that. Everyone knows goblin meat is sour and stinky, it could easily upset your stomach for a month and make you unable to eat anything. Seems like you have quite a clear understanding of yourself." Old Reap withdrew his gaze. "This blood smell seems like it's been on the ground for a while, let's go see what died up ahead." Chapter 125. The group carefully continued forward, entering a cave with a fork in the road. On the ground lay the corpses of 3 werewolf beings, the source of the bloody smell. "They've been dead for at least an hour, must be the work of those demons." Old Reap crouched to inspect the bodies, announcing to everyone. For Lancelot, it was his first time seeing such creatures that were said to be like the plague. The werewolves were very tall, capable of reaching over 7 feet if they stood straight, but they had severe hunchbacks, their spines bent at almost right angles. They had hooves like wild beasts, hands resembling those of humanoid creatures, and atop their necks were hyena-like heads. Even in death their expressions remained vicious and malevolent. Their weapons and armor were clearly stolen from other beings, but evidently, this was not enough to stand against the steel demon's cold iron greatsword. Judging from the nearly bisected corpses, these werewolves never had a chance to fight back. The demons clearly knew of this secret passage, handled these blokes blocking the way without breaking a sweat. Phil commented, "I thought this secret passage was really hidden. There are still a few who know of this secret passage. If the demons got to one of them, I believe they would sell out this secret without hesitation for any insignificant reward." Old Reap sighed, and it might well be that the spy was sent by the demons themselves, having already figured out everything about Oasis Fort. "What about Twin Bridges Town?" Bruto asked, "Are there spy demons there too?" "Definitely, it's inevitable. Demons are masters of seducing others into their service. Not just blood war mercenaries, even demons have been foolish enough to be tempted," the werewolf explained, "but no matter how hard we try, there are always new fools ready to sell their souls to the demons for a bit of gold. We can't even count the number of rats we catch each year. And this guy has won the rat-catching contest many times. I've always thought it had something to do with his keen sense of smell." Phil was about to say the word dog nose again, but he stopped himself just in time. Twin Bridges Town has always been a key military supplier for tannery and a major infiltration target for demons. Speaking of which, there's a joke on that topic. Want to hear it? "Oh, let's not, that bit is too old." Old Reap shook his head, "and they've definitely heard it already." I haven't. Kola expressed what was on Lancelot and the others' minds. "What's the joke?" "It goes like this. One day, the Lady Sonam of the Mercenary Hall seeks an audience with Tajana, the Lord of Twin Bridges Town, saying she's caught a high-ranking demon spy hiss, and asks how to deal with him, hiss. Do we skin him and plaster it over the town gates, hiss? Or chop off his limbs and jar them, hiss?" Upon hearing this, Tajana angrily states, "Oh my dear Sonam, bring this poor fellow to me. If you kill him, who will tell us what last month's exact output was?" The goblin mimicked the voice of the serpent demon and the succubus lord, causing everyone to burst into laughter, which eased the tension quite a bit. All right, that's a stale old joke," the werewolf rolled his eyes, "let's keep moving." "Which way?" the goblin asked, "I mean, which way can we avoid the lair of those werewolves?" "Can't avoid it either way," the werewolf shook his head, "and from the smell, there are even more werewolves ahead, the dead kind. The left path leads to the surface more quickly if that's what you're concerned about." "Let's take the left path, we'd better get back to the ground as soon as possible," Lancelot said. Their mission had been completed, and they should meet up with Yaduz, who was responsible for the rendezvous, as soon as possible. The group no longer spoke and continued on from the left fork. Just as old Reap had said, every now and then, they would come across the mutilated corpse of a werewolf, with blood splattered all over the walls on either side of the passage. The scent in the air was simply nauseating. However, the agony didn't last long. After walking for about 10 minutes, they once again saw the open sky above them. Lancelot kept an eye on the surroundings. The situation was as he had expected, with plenty of freshly chopped conifer stumps nearby, clearly felled by demons to build siege engines. But fortunately, there were no signs of demons nearby. It seemed the demons had not planned for a prolonged siege, or else they would have left some forces to watch over this resource point. They were about 3 miles from Oasis Fort, with flames reaching to the sky, dyeing half of it a dark red. The sounds of battle carried over were now very faint, but if one concentrated true chi to their eyes, one could still roughly make out the situation of the fight. Several sections of the wall had been completely destroyed, but it seemed the demons were still resisting. Lancelot also saw the demons' siege engines, giant catapults placed between this small forest and Oasis Fort, but most had been burnt down, with only a few still operational. It seemed the bone demon he had killed might indeed have been the demon's backup plan. Without the support of the skeleton sea, the demons would probably pay a much heavier price than originally planned. If the demons managed to luckily hold Oasis Fort, then those treasures looted from the succubus palace could be considered Molo's compensation to him, Lancelot thought silently to himself. I never thought I'd say this, but not having a few thousand tons of rocks above my head does make me feel a lot lighter. Bruto stretched his body. So, where is that Brezua demon named Yaduz? Goblin, do you know how to contact that guy? Find more chapters on Empire. No need to go looking for him specifically, Phil shook his head, we just need to make a round, and he'll come to find us. If he doesn't show up, then we'll just go straight to the backup rendezvous point. So the group moved cautiously through the woods, but there was no sight of Yaduz. Lancelot extended his spiritual sense to its limit and likewise detected no sign of the Brezua demon, so they had likely withdrawn to the backup rendezvous point upon discovering the demon army 2 days earlier. Lancelot had actually expected this. It was no big deal for Yaduz's men to ambush a few guards at Oasis Fort, but it would be foolish to directly confront the demon army. If that were the case, he would have to greatly downgrade his estimate of Yaduz. Just then, his spiritual sense was suddenly triggered, and he turned his head to look up at the sky above the demon catapult's position. A humanoid creature with 2 gigantic wings was circling in the sky. The creature was so beautiful, just like the angels of legend. But upon closer inspection, it was clear that this was not any holy creature from the heavens. Her wings were a deep, near black-red, like those of a vulture, not the pure white of an angel's. Although Lancelot knew little about demons, he had heard of this creature's notoriety. It was an Enrise, more commonly known as a lust demon, a fallen angel or their offspring. While their beauty was by no means inferior to that of the succubi of Tannery, it was the desire for battle and slaughter that dominated them, making them the fiercest and most disciplined warriors of Barthez. Chapter 126. Lancelot, making use of his extraordinary vision, was sizing up the Enires when the fallen angel suddenly turned her head, locking eyes directly with him. Lancelot's heart sank with a thud, and the next moment he saw the succubus's lips appear to move. Spread out! He cried loudly, while lightning fast, drew frost slash from behind his back. Bruto and Paladin, who had long been in sync with him, almost instinctively retreated, while the others, startled, turned their heads towards Lancelot in confusion. They just glimpsed a beautiful woman with wings on her back, clad in ornate plate armor, suddenly appear and, wielding a gemstone-studded longsword, fiercely slash down at Lancelot. Lancelot barely blocked the succubus's attack, the tremendous force from the opponent's weapon making it difficult to parry, causing him to stagger back several steps. A storm of shock and fear surged in the depths of his heart. He had only glanced at her from such a distance, yet she had immediately sensed it, and in the next second, she had precisely teleported to his side, launching a lightning-fast sword strike that almost knocked him to the ground. Such was the strength of this Enrise. Succubus. As priests of the true deity, Alamir and Vito recognized this demonic being of legend first, their faces showing a look of horror. Despite their resemblance to celestial beings, the sinister color of their wings was the biggest distinguishing feature from angels, and those blood-red eyes, seemingly forever burning with rage, revealed the true identity of these creatures. Hearing this, the others quickly pulled out their weapons, readying themselves for battle. This Enrise seemed surprised by everyone's reaction. Normally, mere mortals would be in awe of her beauty upon first sight, with the more fragile-minded perhaps even worshipping her, but these people, apart from the initial surprise, seemed completely immune to her charm. She glanced at the succubus knight in front of her and suddenly raised her eyebrows, scoffing. I was wondering where this reasonably strong succubus came from, thinking it was that one. Turns out it's just a human disguised by transfiguration. Lancelot's heart sank once again. He knew that high-level fiends possessed the ability of true sight, allowing them to see directly through invisibility, illusions, and magically altered appearances. His well-used succubus disguise had been seen through so quickly. Go! I'll cover the rear! Lancelot shouted immediately. The enemy's strength far exceeded that of his companions, their staying behind would hardly help and would only hinder his escape. Although reluctant, he had diligently cultivated several techniques recommended by Han Tianzun in the Little Bamboo Slip for fast, long-distance travel, but he never thought he'd have to use them so soon. Enjoy exclusive chapters from Empire. Everyone sprang into action. Vito and Alamir wanted to say something more, but Bruto and Paladin promptly held them back. Both understood the numerous aces Lancelot had up his sleeve and had full trust in their companion's abilities, as well as a profound understanding of the meaning of burden. Not bad, quite sentimental. The succubus's lips curled into a mocking smile, her wings unfurled, she bellowed, but you should worry about yourself first. With a light leap, the succubus appeared more than 10 feet in the air and then, like an eagle, swooped down on Lancelot with force, slashing out a series of sword strikes in rapid succession. Lancelot's attention was highly focused, with true chi filling every meridian in his body. He swung his sword with all his might, executing an upper slash to meet the oncoming enemy. The unadorned frost slash clashed heavily with the enemy's ornate longsword, and the tremendous force pushed Lancelot backward. He released true chi from beneath his feet to prevent slipping, and as a result, 2 deep grooves appeared on the ground. The succubus was slightly knocked upward from the recoil, but her actions didn't stop for a moment as she charged at Lancelot once again. Lancelot no longer dared to take the enemy's diving attacks head-on, he positioned himself for a parry, but at the instant when the succubus's longsword was about to enter his attack range, he shifted his guard to a cleave, striking hard on the blade of his opponent, and his body leveraged the force to jump into mid-air. The succubus seemed not at all surprised by this change. She stomped on the ground heavily, then like a compressed spring, launched herself into the air even faster than Lancelot, raising her hand for another sword strike. Lancelot, still in mid-air, struggled to adjust his posture, gripping the sword hilt with one hand and the blade with the other, blocking the incoming strike. He barely blocked the succubus's slash, but being completely inexperienced with winged combat, he couldn't leverage on anything mid-air and was sent tumbling away like a baseball hit by a bat, crashing heavily into the trunk of a jagged fir and barely coming to a stop. He slowly slid down the tree trunk, a sweetness rising in his throat, and he violently spat out a large mouthful of fresh blood. Hee, not bad, the succubus said, twirling her long sword fancily as she slowly walked toward him. Take off that foolish transformation ring. That body limits your performance. Let me see your true strength. Lancelot quickly glanced at his companions. They had executed his plan well and were almost out of his line of sight. Considering the enemy's speed, he knew he had to hold out a little longer. He took off the transformation ring, deliberately slowing down his movements to buy his friends more time and also to adjust his disordered breathing. The succubus was right, wearing the transformation ring he indeed couldn't utilize his full strength, the body couldn't achieve perfect coordination, and the wings on his back were somewhat of a hindrance. These subtle differences weren't obvious when facing enemies weaker than him, but against a powerful demon like Enrise, any small error could lead to fatal consequences. The succubus didn't rush to attack but waited patiently for him to revert to his original form. With a flash of magic light, Lancelot was once again the human knight, 6.5 feet tall with slightly curly black hair and light blue eyes. Ha, you look much more pleasing to the eye now, the succubus said, nodding her head with satisfaction. Let's have a proper dance, sir. Before her words fell, she beat her wings and dove once more. But this time, Lancelot didn't stay in place. Instead, he dashed forward like a spectre, rolled over just before the succubus landed, and got behind her. Inirisa's diving attack was like the first wave of a knight's charge on the battlefield, where the best outcome of a head-on clash was mutual destruction. In both of his short exchanges with the succubus, he had been suppressed from the first move, continuously being placed on the back foot. He couldn't afford to keep doing that. Chapter 127. Lancelot took the initiative, turning to face the enemy and delivering an upper slash with his long sword, a signature opening move of his triple strike. As if the succubus had eyes in the back of her head, her long sword swept low from behind to parry Lancelot's weapon and, with a half-turn, she was precisely positioned to catch Lancelot's following horizontal slash. The human knight's longsword retracted like lightning, thrusting out the final move of the triple strike straight at the enemy's face. A sneer appeared on the succubus's face as if she had anticipated the thrust. The moment Lancelot's hand began to lift, she started to duck, her longsword aiming for Lancelot's forward-stepping right foot. However, unexpectedly for the succubus, Lancelot's thrust was a feint. His figure suddenly flickered and he leaped into the air, spinning rapidly and unleashing a powerful sword strike at the succubus's nape. Well done! The succubus let out a fierce shout as her wings flapped backward, making her fall forward as if pushed. Her right hand's longsword, swift as a serpent, recoiled to her back in a flash to block Lancelot's thunderous strike. With her left hand pressing against the ground, the succubus spun around like a top, swiftly realigning herself. Like a cobra coiled on the ground, she thrust upwards. Had Lancelot been reckless enough to pursue his attack, the sword would have pierced straight through the human knight. But after his fastest and strongest strike failed to hit, Lancelot naturally didn't dare to pursue further. He used the recoil from the clashing swords to create distance, lightly touching the succubus's sword tip with his weapon as he landed solidly at a standoff distance where neither could continue their assault. Not bad, the succubus teased with a fancy flourish of her longsword, licking her fingers with her tongue. That move just now was brilliant. I haven't had such a thrilling fight in a long while, and you're making me almost reluctant to kill you. Lancelot focused on calming his irregular breathing, steadying the surging true chi within him. Despite his readiness for difficulty, the succubus's strength still exceeded his expectations. In terms of reaction speed and agility, the previously defeated Spiritual Cultivator was superior, but the succubus's swordsmanship had reached a level of near perfection, making her a far more lethal enemy than the Spiritual Cultivator. When the first two moves of the triple strike were blocked by the enemy, Lancelot understood the extent of the enemy's swordsmanship skills. If he had committed fully to the final thrust, it would have left a huge vulnerability. Normally, if the first two moves of the triple strike did not penetrate the opponent's defense, the final thrust would have to become a feint, although such a scenario almost never occurred. And the maneuver of leaping and spinning in mid-air for a horizontal slash was something he could barely perform without armor, practicing against wooden stakes. Without further strengthening his body through spiritual cultivation, this move would be impossible to execute while clad in heavy armor. Yet this strike, which neared the limits of human capability, still failed to inflict any damage. It was said that Anaires was originally a battle angel assigned to combat demons, or perhaps a descendant of those once noble celestial beings who possessed unparalleled combat skills. They were twisted by the hatred and slaughter brought by prolonged battles and subsequently were shunned by the gods. Yet, it was precisely the role assigned to them by the gods, so when Astymos parted ways with the other gods, they followed the Lord of the Nine Hells without hesitation to what would become the yet unformed Barto Hell. Though their weapons no longer swung for righteousness and protection, and they had lost the blessing of divine power, their strength was still terrifying. Find exclusive stories on Empire. The music hasn't stopped yet, sir, the succubus said as her wings flapped hard, propelling her like an arrow released from its bow, skimming across the ground and shouting at the same time, "Let's continue." The last syllable hadn't left his lips when the succubus rushed in front of the human knight, thrusting her sword fiercely. Lancelot, as if his feet were fitted with springs, rolled to the side and narrowly dodged the enemy's lunge. In the brief moment their figures crossed, the succubus's sword stabbed into the ground like a pillar, firmly planted. Then, with her wings stretched to their fullest behind her, she spun half a circle around the hilt of her sword in midair, raising her leg clad in steel boots, and kicked Lancelot hard in the back. Lancelot hadn't expected the succubus to change direction so quickly, only feeling a terrifying gust hit his back. He managed to gather some true chi to shield himself, but still felt a massive force strike him, as if a battering ram had hit him, sending him flying forward. He rolled on the ground several times in an embarrassing tumble before coming to a stop. Getting up, he immediately raised his sword in defense, only to find the succubus standing in the same spot, watching him with mocking amusement, in no hurry to follow up her attack. He tasted sweetness in his throat and spat out another mouthful of blood. However, since he had protected his back with true chi just now, he hadn't suffered any internal damage. After expelling this blood tainted with impurities, he surprisingly felt much clearer. "Hey, boss, you all right? Anything I can help with?" The voice of Ekman suddenly rose from the depths of his heart. Lancelot then realized the fellow hadn't left, he'd been lying on the ground all along, right by his feet, pretending to be an ordinary skull. "How come you, just lie there, "Don't move," Lancelot ordered via telepathy, while the succubus strolled over with an easy gait, speaking as she walked. "My name is Valtira, a humble servant of Duchess Grycia. Remember my name, for when I kill you, your soul will go to a place awaiting the divine envoys. There are also envoys from hell. Speak with them, then give them my name, and they will offer you a generous contract." "Thank you, my name is..." "That's not important, once you're in hell, you'll have a new name." Lancelot was cut off mid-sentence by the other. "Now, let's continue this pleasing dance. How much longer can you keep up with me?" Valtira charged again, expecting Lancelot to evade with that strange movement technique once more, so she didn't charge too fiercely, ready to change direction at any moment. Lancelot's body leaned slightly to one side, a motion the succubus recognized as his prelude to dodging. She swung her weapon forward swiftly, her mind already plotting the follow-up attack. Unexpectedly, the human knight didn't dodge, but swung his long sword with all his might, catching the succubus's casual strike. The two long swords clashed tightly, and Lancelot, using the entangling sword technique and catching his opponent off guard, managed to block her charge and found themselves at a stalemate. The outwitted Valtira was infuriated, her hand forcefully adding pressure to her sword, but Lancelot suddenly let go with one hand that was gripping the sword while giving the other hand a light flick. Caught off guard, the succubus's weapon was deftly directed toward the ground. Just then, a skull that had lain on the ground suddenly bounded up, pressing down hard on the succubus's sword, while Lancelot's now free left hand shot forward like lightning, already touching the chest of the succubus. Chapter 128. The scene seemed to momentarily pause, but in reality, Lancelot's movements never ceased. With a clench of his fingers, the innate true chi within his dantian burst forth. An invisible sword aura emitted from his palm, which was pressed against Valtira's chest, piercing viciously into the demon's body. Ah! The demon screamed miserably, its wings flapping wildly as it rapidly retreated more than 30 feet. A hole, as thick as a small arm, appeared in her chest, and her exquisite armor was covered with web-like cracks. A massive amount of blood spilled between her and Lancelot, like a person cut in half had crawled over it. Lancelot was also startled by the horrific amount of bleeding from his opponent, but he had no time to examine her injuries closely. He grabbed a skull that had proved very useful off the ground, turned, and ran. His movements seemed slow, yet with each step, he covered dozens of feet, surprisingly 3 times faster than the demon's pained retreat. From the feedback from his hand, he had used his trump card, the innate true chi, yet it still didn't penetrate the demon's body, whose weakness wasn't the heart. Continuing to fight could hardly guarantee even a 50-50 chance of victory. Moreover, considering the teleportation magic the demon used in her surprise attack, she was a strong spellcaster. Who knew what other strange techniques she hadn't yet revealed? He had no real reason to keep fighting. From the beginning, the goal had been to buy as much time as possible, then seize the chance to escape. Thanks to Ekman's superb acting and a few of his own tricks, he had managed to injure his opponent. If not now, when? "You scoundrel! Give me back my sword!" A furious roar came from behind, and Lancelot looked down to see Ekman slowly swallowing Valtira's sword into his own dimensional space, leaving only the hilt visible. Together with the sword marks on its skull, the look was indescribably bizarre. "Why are you taking her sword?" Lancelot shouted through their mental link, "We need to run for our lives." "Am I taking it for myself?" "I'm taking it for you, boss." Ekman cried out in his mind, feeling wronged. "Boss, you were beaten until you spewed blood. Can't I collect some compensation for you?" Lancelot had no time for further talk with the skull because his spirit perception alerted him to the fluctuations of teleportation magic ahead. Without thinking, he made an almost right-angled turn. As expected, the demon appeared at the source of the magical disturbance. She held in her hands a long rope, composed entirely of blue energy with a silver arrowhead at one end, and lashed it out at the fleeing Lancelot, yelling, "Entangle!" The rope seemed to come alive, striking towards Lancelot like a venomous snake. The human knight had no interest in testing whether he could escape this bizarre entanglement. He exerted all his true chi, twisting his body strangely, and his speed instantly increased by 3-fold. The rope reached about 30 feet before it finally caught up to Lancelot's back, but by then, it had stretched to its maximum length and couldn't even wrap around his waist. Like a rubber band pulled to its limit, it snapped back swiftly into the demon's hand. "Damn it!" Enrise roared out in anger, followed by a long string of vile curses. "Boss, did you hear that?" Ekmund exclaimed, as expected of the demon of desire, such literary cultivation is undeniable. I even learned quite a few new words, and my mind is filled with a dictionary of curses, after all. Lancelot had no time to wonder why a skull had such knowledge in its mind, as he was holding Ekmund's skull in one hand and grasping an upper-grade spirit stone earth crystal in the other, rapidly absorbing the nature's spiritual energy within it without any concern for the massive waste this caused. Almost within a single breath, Lancelot and the demon of desire had put nearly 100 feet between them again, the human knight moving as fast as a shooting star, much to the frustration of Valtira who couldn't catch him. Once again, Lancelot's spirit perception alerted him to a magical fluctuation ahead, and he sharply changed direction while his inner true chi burst forth with full force. This time, the demon of desire appeared out of nowhere, holding a longbow. She completed the actions of drawing, aiming, and releasing the arrow with incredible speed, but by the time her arrow left the bowstring, Lancelot had already sprinted another 100 feet away. Enjoy more content from Empire. The distance and speed gave Lancelot a chance to dodge. He slightly shifted twice, confident he could evade, but the arrow seemed to have eyes of its own, changing directions as he did. Before Lancelot could react again, the arrow had embedded itself in his back. The sturdy plate armor was ripped open by the triangular arrowhead before it pierced into Lancelot's flesh. His inner true chi responded immediately, fighting hard against the foreign object, but still, the arrow penetrated nearly 2 inches deep, causing him to violently spit out a mouthful of fresh blood. Worse yet, he discovered that the arrow was poisoned. These fallen angels really went all out. Although he had previously taken Colin's antitoxin potion, its effect was limited against such a strong poison. Lancelot had to divert some of his true chi to suppress the spread of the poison, which slowed him down a bit. Feeling that one upper-grade spirit stone could no longer keep up with the consumption rate of his true chi, he lifted Ekmund towards his waistband, and mentally commanded the skull. "Bite." "Ah! Isn't it inappropriate now, boss? Bite the waistband." Lancelot was speechless about the skull's thought process. He didn't care if the guy understood or not, he relaxed his grip on the skull and reached for another earth crystal. Now holding an earth crystal in each hand, his true chi was quickly drawn from the gemstones, and his speed dramatically increased once more. The skull, ever the mouthy one, was firmly biting his waistband, vigorously shaking up and down in the air due to the headwind. Seeing her attack connect and the enemy's speed momentarily slow down, Valtira hadn't even started celebrating when Lancelot's speed returned to normal, and it seemed even slightly faster than before, causing her to curse like a housewife who just discovered her husband's secret. Just then, a violent magical fluctuation arose from the direction of Oasis Fort. A blood-red column filled with a frenzied aura shot straight into the sky, turning her complexion deathly pale. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!" She yelled furiously at Lancelot's retreating figure. "Human, we are not done yet." With a furious stomp, she turned towards Oasis Fort, activated the teleportation technique again, and vanished on the spot. Chapter 129. "Boss," Ekmund's shaking voice arose in Lancelot's heart, "the succubus seems to have stopped chasing us. Should we take a break?" He continued, "I can't hold on much longer, and the ride is really bumpy." Upon hearing this, Lancelot slowed down. It had been 5 minutes since he was shot, and with the power of 2 upper-grade spirit stones, he had sprinted nearly 3 miles. Within the range of his spirit perception, he could no longer sense Enrise. He naturally noticed the magical fluctuations from Oasis Fort. Something must have happened there that reminded the demon's high-rank commander of his duties. Lancelot hid in the shadow of a huge rock, his chest heaving violently as he spat out another mouthful of green, glowing, foul blood. The venomous arrow shot by the succubus was still stuck in his back. He hadn't had the time to deal with it, making him move like a wind-up toy. "Boss, let me help you pull the arrow out." The skeleton skull floated behind Lancelot. "I'm not afraid of the poison on the arrows. That stuff doesn't work on the undead." Lancelot shook his head, and he channeled his true chi, hardening the muscles around the wound like iron, slowly pushing the arrowhead out of his body. He then cautiously removed his blood-soaked back armor from the inside and extracted the arrow stuck in it. This arrow was exquisitely made. The shaft was crafted from a dense yet flexible wood, with very neat patterns. The fletching used fine, black feathers that appeared as if they grew directly from the shaft. The tip was a cone of precious mithril, with fine notches for holding poison and vicious barbs, designed to inflict maximum pain on prey that wasn't immediately killed. Lancelot thought for a moment and then wrapped the arrow in the robe he wore when transformed into a succubus, stowing it away in the dimensional bag. It wasn't in his nature to leave a debt unpaid. He resolved to return the favor to the succubus named Valtira whenever the opportunity arose. If there was no chance, the arrow would also serve as a great storytelling prop. A certain vampire maid would certainly love it. The wound from the arrow still struggled to heal, although he could not yet clear the toxins. Lancelot fully suppressed their spread. Once he rendezvoused with his companions, he believed Alamir and Vito would have a way to completely resolve his poisoning. Priests with divine arts were specialists in countering these adverse effects. He wrapped the wound with a bandage, smoothed the punctured hole on the surface of his armor with the butt of his sword, then donned his gear again. To avoid leading enemies to his companions, he had fled in a different direction and had already covered a considerable distance. With focused concentration, he summoned the warhorse, whose hooves blazed with fire, unseen for some time. The abyssal creature, forcibly summoned here, instinctively moved to attack its summoner, but a swift slap from Lancelot made clear who had brought it forth. "Boss, that mount of yours is quite something." Ekmund found a comfortable position in the saddle and settled himself down. "It has a bit of a Death Knight vibe." Lancelot smiled but said nothing. He looked up to roughly discern the direction to Crackskull Valley, then, a man, a horse, and a skull set off under the dim moonlight. He was prepared for Ekmund's babble along the way, but to his surprise, the skull, recently met, fell silent, seeming to be burdened with heavy thoughts. "What's wrong with you?" After a long wait, it was Lancelot who couldn't hold back any longer and spoke up. "You've seemed reluctant to talk since earlier." "Ah, boss, I'm pondering over a very painful question." "What question?" "Who am I?" The skull said listlessly, not in the philosophical sense of that ultimate question, but more like the queries of a pitiful creature who has lost its memory about its past identity. "How come you suddenly have this doubt? Didn't you think about it before when you were in that pit of corpses?" Sigh. Ekmund let out a sigh. "I did think about it, but back then I had no clues at all, so I simply stopped bothering. But just now, when I saw you fighting with that Anires, lots of images suddenly flooded into my mind." "Did you remember your original identity?" "Not at all, it just made me more confused," Ekmund said gloomily. "All these meaningless fragments make me feel like I've remembered something, but in reality, I haven't at all." "Tell me about it, what kind of images?" Lancelot asked curiously. "Maybe I can notice some details you missed from a different perspective." "Continue reading at Empire." "That makes sense." Ekmund, excited, replied. Then a sequence of images was projected directly into the man's mind through the bond with Lancelot. Lancelot focused intently, realizing it was a first-person perspective, apparently on a battlefield in the midst of a blood war. Countless coward devils surged like a tide towards the demons' lines by the riverside, and on the other end of the battlefield, the significantly fewer beard demons stood in neat rows, marching out of warships to form rock-solid squares, quietly waiting for the demons to arrive. The owner of the perspective looked up, noticing that the battle in the air had already ignited. Several Anires continuously showered the demon army with arrows from longbows and would occasionally swoop down with longswords, carving a bloody wave through the dense sea of demons. This spectacular and glorious sight was deeply impressive, and perhaps it was the scene of the succubus diving at Lancelot today that had awakened this fragment of Ekmund's memory. The perspective shifted to the side, where a group of blood-war mercenaries, obviously mortals, were making their final preparations for battle. At that moment, a voice from off-screen was calling the name Ekmund, its cold and bone-chilling tone echoing. The perspective turned to look behind themselves, only to see a skeleton in a robe staring in the direction of the perspective, after which the image faded to darkness, marking the end of the memory fragment. "It looks like you were on the side of the demons," Lancelot commented. "When you turned your head, I noticed that below the perspective was emptiness. Clearly you were already a skull at that point." "Yes," Ekmund said, dispiritedly. "That lich called out my name. I guess that must have been my previous master, but I have no recollection of that person whatsoever." "Not necessarily," Lancelot argued. "I've heard that liches generally have a vast wealth of knowledge, and I find it hard to believe that such a creature would need the services of a mimir. Also, why are all these images in grey? Is that an issue with your memory?" Chapter 130. "It must be related to the location where this memory occurred." Ekmund shook his head. "Between the bottomless abyss and Barto Hell lies a plain called Hades in the Grey Wastelands. Most of the time, that's the main battlefield for the blood wars. Any object entering this plane loses its color, turning into shades of black and white, which is why you saw the images like that. But the demons have already attacked the abyss, Lancelot said with a frown, this memory must be quite old. It seems I've really been dead for a long time. Ekman's mood visibly low. Besides making me irritated and confused, this memory doesn't provide any useful information. There's still plenty of content, just not enough to deduce your identity, Lancelot consoled. This memory seems to have been awakened because of the image of Enrise. Maybe, as our journey continues, more and more of your memories will be awakened. Once we have enough pieces, maybe you'll be able to piece together your past. Thanks boss, I think this approach sounds reliable. Ekman's fleshless skull revealed a frightening smile, and he seemed less downcast. As they conversed, the iconic cliffs of Crackskull Valley gradually came into Lancelot's view. After about half an hour, Lancelot finally arrived at the second rendezvous point that had been agreed upon. His spirit perception told him that Bruto and the others were just ahead, almost arriving simultaneously. Lancelot did not try to hide his presence, and soon Bruto spotted him, loudly greeting and pulling everyone out to meet. Ha! What did I tell you? Lancelot is definitely fine, Bruto said cheerfully. What about Enrise? Did you deal with her? The one responsible for rendezvousing with them, Yaduz, was also startled and came over from the shadows. The dwarf's words made him somewhat incredulous. As a demon, he knew very well how formidable a creature like Enrise was, an antithesis to demons before and after their fall. If Lancelot could kill an Enrise one-on-one, then he had to reassess the strength of human knights. I'm no match for her, Lancelot patted Ekman's bald head. This guy was playing dead on the ground, but at a critical moment, he struck the opponent suddenly, creating a chance for me to break away from the battle. Plus, something unexpected seemed to have happened at Oasis Fort, which forced her to give up on chasing me, though she did shoot me with an arrow before leaving. Lancelot turned around, showing everyone the hole in his armor, then asked the two priests. The arrow that hit me was laced with a very strong poison, which I can only suppress slightly. Can you guys help me solve this problem? You're poisoned. Vito looked at Lancelot in surprise, but you look completely normal. Let me handle this, I'm a cleric of the domain of life, I am skilled in this, Alamir interjected. Take off your armor, let me see your wound. Lancelot did as he was told, removing his back armor and tearing off the makeshift bandage, showing his back to everyone. There, around the wound at the center of his back, there was a discomforting deep black color extending about an inch around. Outside this area, the color quickly faded, as if some force was confining the poison within that range. It's all right, it's not a big issue, Alamir said with a confident smile, then softly recited a spell, summoning a red light full of life force and gently touching Lancelot's wound. The fingertips of the elf priest were very soft, and Lancelot felt no discomfort at all. A divine force flowed into his body from the touch of the elf's fingers, and the stubborn toxins inside him, like snow under a harsh sun, quickly dispersed under the pressure of Lancelot's true chi. Feeling the toxins completely eradicated, Lancelot felt relieved. He put his armor back on, and then Yaduz, who had been silent all this time, spoke up. I didn't expect to actually see you again. Have you secured the mission objective? Find your next adventure on Empire. It's with me, Lancelot nodded. You must have witnessed what happened at Oasis Fort. We might have discovered the demon's army even before you did, the goat-headed demon confirmed Lancelot's guess. When those infantry with bronze masks on their faces entered the forest, I almost thought it was some kind of foolish prank, another one of Molo's stupid schemes. But, the foul stench emitting from those creatures confirmed they were indeed a group of Bartes, not to mention their work method reminiscent of a swarm of bees. What about your subordinates? Paladin suddenly interjected, then immediately felt it was abrupt and quickly explained. Lady Tajana mentioned that you would lead 20 Bruto warriors to meet us. There is a whole army of Bartes attacking the city over there, and we are behind enemy lines. Yaduz calmly looked at Paladin. If it were 200 years ago, I would have charged forward without hesitation, just like my subordinates, to relish in this feast of slaughter. You seem. The scholar carefully chose his words, different from other demons. A former superior changed me, the goat-headed demon's voice fluctuated slightly. He taught me the meaning of duty. My current duty is to bring you back, although I did not hold much hope for your escape earlier. If you had not made it out, then I would have had to ensure that Lady Tajana was the first to learn of these developments. Hey, I was there too, Old Reap spoke up at this point. I'm glad to see you again, Yaduz. I didn't know before that you were in there, werewolf. Yaduz and Old Reap seemed to know each other, as he nodded to the latter. As always, you managed to keep a good escape route. Hey, this guy is as aloof as ever, acting as if showing any more emotion would ignite the arsenal inside him. Phil shrugged his shoulders. Did you notice any other information? Lady Tajana would certainly want to understand where this demon army came from. The goat-headed demon was silent for a while, seemingly uncertain about what he was about to say, but still spoke. There was a guy, his body wrapped in iron chains, guarded by a group of beard demons, wielding an axe that seems to be Punisher Whisk's giant flying beheading axe. Are you sure? Old Reap's eyes widened in surprise. Whisk, the Punisher who was murdered by his own pet and lover a few months ago, his weapon appeared in the hands of demons? What does that imply? Chapter 131. This indicates the shadow of Barthez behind Whisk's death, but it still doesn't explain the origin of these demon armies. Yaduz shook his head. Anyway, Lady Tajana must be informed of the situation here immediately. There's no time to delay, let's set off. Phil took out 3 magic whistles, blew them in sequence, and a sound of horses neighing came from nowhere. Soon, 3 carriages appeared in the distance and rapidly approached them. When the carriages first appeared, they were almost transparent, as if they were still in another world, but as they drew closer, their outlines gradually became clear, and when they stopped in front of everyone, they had completely solidified into their physical forms. Lancelot looked closely and realized that these were the very carriages they had ridden to Oasis Fort. Just a few hours ago, they had been parked in the courtyard they had left at Oasis Fort. It had never occurred to him that these carriages were magical items. You didn't think I'd just abandon these assets, did you? Phil, as if reading Lancelot's mind, said, that's not the style of us goblins. Most goblins send their lives away for a bit of scrap metal. The werewolf mercilessly struck Phil, but you are different, you're more likely to blow yourself up. That would be my best fate, the goblin replied nonchalantly. As for you, I'm sure you'll die at the hands of some succubus. Don't think I don't know why you're so keen on doing undercover work in various neutral towns. It's dangerous, and where your so-called intelligence funds go. No matter where, succubi are the best source of intelligence, the werewolf retorted cheekily. You wouldn't believe how much some idiots will divulge just to prove they are someone of importance, all for a succubus's favor. So your intelligence gathering is just sitting behind the bar pretending to be profound. The goblin sneered. I've noticed, as long as there's a succubus around, you'll reveal your wolf head, so you don't even need to speak yourself. Curious succubi will come up asking this and that. The goblin then started pinching his voice, imitating the succubi's voice in a high and shrill tone. Why do you have such a head? Can I touch your ears? Do you go crazy when you see round and smooth things? Then, he switched to a pretend deep hoarse voice, mimicking the werewolf's manner of speaking. No, I am a werewolf with great self-control. Oh? Are you sure? What if it's round and big and also very soft? I told you, I may. Oh, all right, maybe not. The goblin suddenly lifted his shirt up. What if a pair appeared at the same time? Laughter erupted amongst them all at once. Bruto laughed so hard he couldn't stand straight, and a certain skull laughed so hard it rolled on the ground like a ball. Even Yaduz cracked a smile, as demons actually have a good sense of humor, especially when it comes to raunchy jokes and cruel pranks. Of course, the only one who didn't laugh was the werewolf, Reap himself. He shrugged indifferently and spoke. Clearly, you're just jealous of my tall and muscular physique, and my wildly handsome face. The werewolf spoke as if he didn't care about the goblin's joke at all. Your jealousy is quite unnecessary. I've seen quite a few succubi who are very interested in goblins. Lancelot recalled the scene he had seen at the succubus palace where, among the male creatures on stage, there appeared to be goblins, indicating that succubi indeed had a diverse taste. The banter between the goblin and the werewolf dispelled much of the tense atmosphere, and everyone climbed onto the carriage, starting their journey towards Twin Bridges town. After spending some time together, the dwarves were no longer so averse to the goblin. To them, goblins were still a lazy, annoying, and selfish race, but Phil was a decent one. At least he was serious about his work. For the dwarves, that was enough to earn their approval. Alamir sat sternly opposite Lancelot, and just when the human knight wondered what the demon wanted, he suddenly began asking about the fight within Iris, including the succubus's power, speed, favorite moves. No detail was spared. Explore more adventures at Empire. Lancelot could tell that this Brezua demon was preparing for the day he might have to face a succubus. Naturally, he was happy to share his experience and especially warned about the succubus's hard-to-resist diving attack, as well as his own attempts to counter it. Their discussion did not last long, and soon Alamir was lost in thought on his own. Lancelot didn't really need to rest. As a high-rank Chi cultivation stage spiritual cultivator, his energy was much more vigorous than before. He could maintain a vibrant state for several days continuously. However, since he had used a lot of energy today, even though he had replenished his true Chi several times with the essence of the earth and sky, meditating to cultivate Chi was obviously more sensible now that he had the chance. Today, he had used up 3 upper-grade spirit stones and several middle-grade spirit stones, which indeed made Lancelot feel a bit pained. Upper-grade spirit stones were what he had been painstakingly saving for his foundation establishment, and it was said that even golden core stage spiritual cultivators could use them to recover true Chi. But then again, if today he had died at the hands of that succubus, keeping these spirit stones would have been meaningless. Lancelot found a relatively less bumpy corner inside the carriage, slowly calmed his mind, and entered into a state of cultivation. Compared to their outward journey, they no longer needed to disguise themselves as a merchant convoy and were without heavy cargo, so the speed of the caravan was very fast. By the evening of the second day, they had crossed the stone bridge over the Stygian River and entered the walls of Twin Bridges town. The first thing upon returning was naturally to report their mission to the succubus lord. Tajana didn't make them wait long and almost immediately summoned them to the throne hall for an audience. "This is Alamir, a priest from Chennai, and this is Kola, an alchemist and cook," Lancelot introduced the elf and the halfling. "During this mission, they provided me with great assistance. I hope to keep them in my mercenary group." On the way here, Lancelot had already introduced to the 2 new companions various aspects of Twin Bridges town, while Phil and Old Reap added many details. The 2 now seemed quite constrained, partly because of the identity of the succubus lord and partly overwhelmed by Tajana's stunning beauty. "Wow, last time a scholar from the black cult, this time a genuine cleric of a righteous god. Will you bring a paladin to meet me next time?" Tajana said languidly from her high throne, "As long as they agree to abide by the rules of Twin Bridges town, I don't mind at all, of course, but don't forget the monthly head tax, go pay it in a bit." "There are only a few days left in this month," Bruto muttered dissatisfiedly. Chapter 132. "My ears are just fine, you dwarven brat." Tajana glanced at Bruto. "No need to hand it over, just have them set up a tent outside Twin Bridges town." "Where's the cross pickaxe?" Lancelot took out the cross pickaxe from the dimensional bag and handed it to a succubus maid standing by. "Continue your saga on Empire." Tajana took the cross pickaxe from the maid and played with the ordinary-looking mining tool with a complex expression, while Lancelot took the opportunity to admire the beautiful profile of the succubus lord. So beautiful, the very purpose of a creature like a succubus is to make one lose self-control. The dwarf priestwit was also staring at the succubus lord, but unlike Lancelot, his face was filled with tension, as if he feared she would accidentally smash the precious holy relic. "Don't be nervous, old man," Tajana shot a glance at Wit, "this cross pickaxe can still smash these floors." "I have no such intention," Wit quickly denied. "As you see, besides its healing effects, this holy relic does not possess any particular power, but as a relic of Dane Frostbeard, it holds an extremely special meaning for us dwarves." "I know," Tajana's tone was surprisingly gentle. She touched the cross pickaxe one more time and finally tossed it back to the dwarf priest. "I permit you to keep this holy relic inside Twin Bridges town, just put it in the Great Hall of the Craftsman Committee." Tajana turned her head to Lancelot. "Well done, knight, those looks you stole just now are your reward. Besides this cross pickaxe, did you get those stones you needed?" "Thank you for the provided intelligence, the spoils from this trip have been quite substantial, but there is more urgent intelligence that you must know immediately." Lancelot turned to the silently standing Brezza demon. "Yaduz, you tell her." Bartez's army suddenly appeared and attacked Oasis Fort, Yaduz stated succinctly. "What?" Tajana stood up from her throne abruptly, her expression turning very serious. "When did this happen? What is the size and main force of the army? What's the outcome?" "The attack began last night. The main forces were Barbazu, numbering around 3,000, with a few Spina demons as air support, and the logistics troops were legion demons, no inferior magic cannon fodder units." Yaduz calmly answered the Lord's questions. "The demons fashioned temporary siege weapons and put all their strength into the battle from the start. The battle was still going on when we left." "Is that so?" Tajana looked sideways at Lancelot. "Seems you're quite lucky, managing to slip away before the siege started." "We were still underground at the Succubus Palace when the siege began. Thanks to the secret tunnel controlled by Old Reap, we were able to escape from inside Oasis Fort." "That must be a truly exciting story, perhaps at another time, you can tell me all about it," Tajana's words were somewhat perfunctory, no longer bothering to use the seductive tone typical of a succubus. She also nodded to the werewolf, then faced the Brezua demon again. Can you determine which army the enemy belonged to? Sir Lancelot and Phil, Reap, have all confirmed the presence of an Enrise in the demon army. Yaduz hesitated slightly. This subordinate guesses that this is likely the amphibious corps of Bartez's second group army. The second group army. Tajana sat back in her chair, pondering with her eyes closed. That would indeed explain their sudden appearance, as this naval force is quite adept at navigating the Stygian River. But that means Twin Bridges town will be the first to encounter this legion unless... Among those Bartez, I saw someone carrying Whisk's axe. Did you see it clearly? Tajana fixed her gaze on Yaduz, sharpened as if it were tangible. This subordinate would not mistake it, the goat-headed demon said after a moment of silence, still very certain. Things are getting interesting now. Tajana's fingertips sprouted sharp claws, gently tapping on the armrest of the throne. Why am I not surprised at all? Whether or not those cunning Bartez intentionally let you see this, the information is critical. Additionally, during their escape from Oasis Fort, they killed an ASI demon and its 4 steel demon guards within the underground passageway. Those oversized skeletons? Aren't they spellcasters? What are they doing underground instead of staying on the battlefield? Tajana looked at Lancelot again. Even though you had a considerable number, defeating an ASI demon is no simple feat. In fact, the ASI demon that Sir Lancelot killed might have been the most important move in reserve for the demons. Old Reap spoke up, this time obediently taking on a human's head. Lady Tajana, do you remember the slave pens at Oasis Fort? Of course, I remember. Molo proudly showed me the bottom of that shithole, which made quite an impression on me. Tajana's expression darkened, but suddenly, as if she realized something, are you suggesting that during the battle with that bone demon, its magic caused a mass of skeletons to rise again? Old Reap divulged the conclusion they had come to after repeatedly discussing it on their way back. This bone demon seemed to be quite proficient in necromancy. We believe its purpose there was likely to initiate some sort of large-scale ritual spell to awaken all the skeletons in the pit. I knew that shithole in Oasis Fort would blow up sooner or later. Molo, that fool, even considered it a symbol of power, utterly ignorant. Tajana shook her head. I quite like the idea, though. You have to admire the demon's creativity in schemes and plots. Well done, Knight. I suppose you took quite a reward from Molo, didn't you? To cover our retreat, Lancelot even clashed with that bird creature. Bruto couldn't help adding, the one you call the Enrise. Oh. This time genuine surprise appeared on Tajana's face as she sized up Lancelot. You didn't manage to kill an Enrise on your own, did you? Of course not. I barely escaped from the succubus's grasp with the help of my companions. Lancelot, a bit overwhelmed by the succubus lord's gaze, quickly shook his head in denial. Let me introduce Ekmund, a mimir. You can see, he has a natural advantage when playing the role of a skeleton. Salutations to you, noble lady. Ekmund rarefied his behavior to seriousness. I am currently following Sir Lancelot, but if you have any commands, I would be most delighted to serve you. We'll have to count him as well. Don't forget to go see Sonam for the taxes later. Tajana merely glanced at Ekmund, then turned to Lancelot to inquire, an Enrise is not an easy opponent to dismiss. How did you escape? Chapter 133. I apologize for updating the wrong content today. I've added an extra chapter as compensation. The previous chapter should have been chapter 126, and the content has been corrected, though the title can't be changed at the moment. If readers find the content doesn't connect, re-downloading it should resolve the issue. I was merely holding on by a thread. Lancelot revealed only part of the truth. At that time, we had just emerged from the secret passage when a succubus spotted us from afar and instantly saw through my disguise. While the succubus was chasing after me, a strong magical fluctuation suddenly erupted from the direction of Oasis Fort, and a red light beam shot up into the sky, which immediately made the succubus leave via a portal. A red light beam, hey! Tajana narrowed her eyes. Was that beam also filled with chaotic, destructive aura? Continue reading at Empire. Lancelot nodded and asked. Do you know what that was? It was just a portal on the ground, leading to a plane nearly inside a volcano. Tajana waved her hand dismissively. It must have been Molo who came back just in time. It seems the demons largely returned without success this time. That's quite a blow for those Bartez folks, he he he. Tajana stood up and waved to Lancelot. Next is the military meeting for Twin Bridges town. You mercenaries can leave now. The group bowed to Tajana and walked out. Phil and Old Reap also bid farewell to Lancelot. They were natives of Twin Bridges town, eagerly discussing which pub to go to that night for drinks, and afterwards, which succubus to visit in the seventh heavens basement to properly unwind. The entertainment venues in Twin Bridges town were not cheap, and the reason these two were so brazen was naturally because Lancelot had given each of them a pouch filled with gold coins. When they received the pouches, their faces were full of surprise, but Lancelot simply said they were spoils from the succubus palace, and they immediately kept quiet and happily accepted the gold. As they were parting, these two jokers even gave Lancelot several flattering compliments, promising to be ready whenever he called for the next job, and to never forget their brother. Lancelot, along with Alamir, Kola and Ekmund, headed straight to the mercenary hall to register themselves as mercenaries and to pay the head tax, a task specifically ordered by Tajana. Having just raided the treasury of the succubus palace, Lancelot certainly didn't plan to cut corners here. However, the six-armed serpent demon wasn't at the reception of the mercenary hall, which allowed a visibly tense Kola and Alamir to relax a bit. Not everyone has the courage to face a notorious high-ranked demon like the six-armed serpent demon, and not even Bruto's repeated assurances that Ms. Sonam was actually a very good client could help. Taking Sonam's shift was Vidya, the succubus salesperson who had assisted Lancelot when he was buying Hagrid Manor before. Seeing Lancelot made this succubus very happy, but her attention quickly shifted to Alamir. This elf, with pointy ears, light golden hair, and a pair of emerald eyes, seemed to perfectly fit the beauty standards of a succubus. Just now in Tajana's castle, the maids couldn't help but steal glances at the elf, but thankfully, Tajana seemed uninterested in elves. This let Lancelot breathe a sigh of relief, while also feeling somewhat happy. Vidya explained that Sonam had been summoned by Lady Tajana to attend a military council. Only then did Lancelot learn that Sonam was one of Tajana's 4 generals, and that her usual front desk role in the mercenary hall was purely out of boredom. Being a neutral town, Twin Bridges town didn't see much warfare, so scaring people in the mercenary hall was essentially her daily pastime. Once Vidya understood the purpose of Lancelot and his group's visit, she promptly helped them with the procedures, and when it came to paying the head tax, she generously suggested that the 3 could continue to deduct this from the goods Sonam owed Bruto. After Alamir thanked her politely, Vidya shyly lowered her head, her face flushing with redness, which shocked Paladin, who thought he understood demons well, to the point where his eyes nearly popped out. When people talk about succubi, they either focus on their seductive bodies or are filled with dreadful tales related to them, Alamir explained to his companions on the way to the market area, but they are also females, and their hearts can be ignited just as well. This is precisely the display of Ms. Shani's supreme power. The group pondered this, especially a certain human knight. However, he quickly decided to put those thoughts aside for now and focus on shopping in the market. Kola was eager to show off her cooking skills to her new companions. The halfling's way of life was to ensure that everyone around her liked her, so she was very serious in choosing ingredients in the market area. Her time cooking in the succubus palace had taught her how to handle many ingredients that were characteristic of the abyss. She recognized many ingredients that Lancelot and his companions had never tried before, such as dried giant monster tentacles, flammable-looking chili peppers, tough skin suitable for making armor, and highly suspicious cheese with worms crawling on it, all of which she insisted on buying. The only thing that slightly comforted Lancelot was that the owners of these goods seemed to really like halflings, appearing genuinely pleased as if they had found a customer who truly knew their goods. When Kola carefully bought a dried fish that smelled like a sour mop from a typhon, the expression on the typhon's face was as if he was parting with his own child. This is a Stygian river memory carp. It may look like it's been dead for hundreds of years, but once you soak it in tears, it'll start bouncing around again, Kola said happily. You can imagine, catching a fish that lives in the Stygian river is nearly impossible, but occasionally a few jump ashore and are picked up by those who know their stuff. But this fish grows in the Stygian river, is it really edible? Bruto asked skeptically, looking at the fish which was almost taller than a halfling. Moreover, how many tears would it take to soak it entirely? We don't really have many sentimental folks here. If it's prepared properly, its flesh is fragrant and tender, and it can even help spellcasters remember an extra magic spell the next day. It's said to feed on the memories in the waters of the Stygian river. As for the tears, Kola walked over to an alchemy materials store, looked around, and quickly spotted a block that looked like black glass. This is it. What is this? Lancelot asked, handing over 1,000 gold coins for a brick whose use he couldn't discern, already feeling a bit of financial pain. This is a brick, extracted from a place called the Fortress of Regret, made entirely of solidified tears. Just soak this brick in water and a whole bucket of water will turn into tears, Kola shrugged. What did I tell you? If you want to be a top chef, you've got to know a bit of alchemy. All right then, Lancelot shrugged, let's buy whatever other materials you need, consider it from our team funds. Let's not buy weapons and gear here, we'll ask Bruto's dad if he's free later. Chapter 134. Clinging to their large and small packages, everyone finally returned to Hagrid Manor after dark had completely fallen. Enjoy exclusive chapters from Empire. Having lived here for over a month, Lancelot, Bruto, and Paladin had come to regard Hagrid Manor as their home. Seeing the silhouette of the three-story building once again, an involuntary sense of relaxation swept over them. It might have been an illusion, but after not seeing it for a few days, the surroundings of Hagrid Manor seemed a bit more ghastly. The small building was brightly lit at this moment, making the darkness not seem so utterly still, likely due to some maid who only worked at night. Alamir, highly sensitive to the presence of undead, had already furrowed his eyebrows, but after all, this was Abyss, and it was they, the breathers, who were the anomalies here. As they drew near, Lancelot established a clear mind link with Dink. The elite Quasimodo demon reported that everything was safe at home, and there had been no disturbances during their absence. This Quasimodo demon had become the top force in Twin Bridges town. Its strength had long surpassed that of its level, but it stubbornly refused to advance. It believed following Lancelot would bring greater benefits. Thus, it had always diligently served the human knight, guarding the house and acting as a bodyguard to a small vampire whenever they ventured out. Bruto, taking the lead, pushed open the grand doors of the building, shouting, "Little Isabella? We're back! I am upstairs!" A voice came down from upstairs accompanied by the sound of a broom accidentally hitting the ground. The sounds of stomping resounded as the adorable maid in a maid's outfit appeared on the stairs, joyfully shouting, "Welcome home! You finally!" The small vampire's words halted mid-sentence, her eyes wide with terror as she looked at the elf priest who had just entered. The latter was also full of astonishment, a shield inscribed with Shani's holy emblem already raised in front of him. "Don't misunderstand, this one is not an enemy." Lancelot quickly grabbed the elf priest, who had once instantaneously reduced countless skeletons to dust with his holy power, a scene too memorable to risk accidentally purifying the undead before him. Lancelot hurriedly explained Isabella's origins to everyone. Convincing the elves to drop their hostility was not difficult, partly because Shani's priests were not rigid monks, and partly, Lancelot thought, because Isabella was simply too cute. Alamir had shown multiple times his appreciation for beautiful things. After learning about Isabella's unfortunate life story and her experiences, the elf priest immediately made a profound apology to the small vampire. Isabella, however, still appeared very frightened, an innate fear of clerics typical of undead, similar to how humans react when they see a snake. In the end, it was Kola, a fellow female, who succeeded in soothing the little girl's emotions. The halfling whispered something into Isabella's ear, bringing a smile to her face, visibly relaxing her body. Soon the two were chattering away. With the matter resolved, Lancelot formally introduced Alamir, Kola, and Ekman to Isabella. The now calm vampire greeted everyone with impeccable court etiquette, her graceful bearing impressing everyone present. "Ah, seeing her makes me really miss my own body." Ekman smacked his lips. "Boss, where are we staying? Let me show you around our base, and you can pick out your own room." Lancelot rose from the couch. "Do you prefer a regular room, or do you think a tomb fits your personality better?" "Definitely a comfortable bed and soft pillows," Ekman said irritably. "Who would sleep in a tomb? Isn't that creepy?" In the end, Kola chose the last bedroom on the first floor, claiming it was closer to the kitchen and her short legs weren't suited for frequently navigating stairs, and no one objected. Alamir became the first resident of the third floor. Having had enough of living in a basement at the Succubus Palace, he decided to move to a higher dwelling. "By the way," reminiscing about living in a tree, Bruto blurted out with a tease, and the elves openly admitted to it. When it was Ekman's turn to choose, the skeleton head found himself in a dilemma. The first floor was already full, he didn't want to go to the basement, and he thought the third floor was too far from his boss, leaving only the second floor. But Paladin was like a problem child, always hanging around him asking questions, almost overwhelming the skeleton head. But as a mimir, answering others' questions was his very reason for being, so Ekman, despite his reservations, chose a room on the second floor and emphasized repeatedly that he had the right to refuse to answer any questions during his rest times. While Lancelot was showing them the rooms, little Isabella had already boiled the hot water, allowing everyone who had been travelling for a whole day and night to wash away the dust from their journey. Lancelot himself took a comfortably hot bath. True Qi could naturally help him stay clean, but bathing served more to relax him. The scalding hot water flowing over his body took away the muscle soreness and smoothed his tense nerves, rejuvenating his spirits. Meanwhile, Kola had donned a chef's apron and was bustling in the kitchen. The enticing aroma filled every corner of the house, and Lancelot, smelling it after his bath, knew that bringing the halfling back was an absolutely right decision. Lancelot went to the living room and saw little Isabella standing behind Kola like a well-behaved apprentice, while the others were on the couch, sharing stories of their adventure. By the way, Paladin, there's something I want to ask you. Lancelot sat down across from Paladin. During the battle with Enrise, she said some interesting things. Oh? What did she say? Paladin straightened up, and the others were drawn in by Lancelot's words, gathering around. Her exact words were, Lancelot recalled with a frown, when you are killed by me, your soul will go to a place waiting for a divine envoy to lead, where there is an envoy from hell. Talk with that envoy, and they will offer me a satisfactory contract. She told you that? Paladin was surprised. Maybe she really admires you, but remember, demons are all expert liars, always prepare for the worst when dealing with them. But what does it mean? Lancelot asked curiously, do souls really go to such a place after death? That's true, at least that's what those awakened from eternal slumber by divine arts and magic have said. Paladin organized his thoughts. Every mortal soul after death proceeds to the domain of the vague, the realm of the Lord of the Dead, to await the envoy of the god they believed in. The divine envoys judge these souls, deciding whether they re-enter the cycle of rebirth or can go to the god's realm. The devil's representatives reside there too, tempting every soul to sell themselves to the 9 hells. What kind of fool would sell their soul after they die? Bruto asked in shock. Chapter 135. Such people are not uncommon. Paladin curled his lip. Imagine you're in the prime of your life, yet die on the battlefield for your lord, leaving behind a helpless wife and daughter. As your soul worries about their miserable remaining lives, the demon appears, offering to send a large sum of gold to your living relatives. If you still don't trust them, demons have plenty of patience. They can even allow you to watch over your loved ones in the netherworld, seeing them happily live out their lives, and all it costs is your soul. If it were you, would you be willing? Bruto opened his mouth, wishing to say something, but ended up keeping silent. Seeing that everyone had fallen into contemplation, Paladin waited for a while before continuing. Those who choose to sell their souls after death typically have some compelling reasons. For a person important to them, for the answer to a problem, for an unachieved revenge, for a long-standing desire. Paladin's voice carried a weary undertone. Put yourself in their shoes and think about it. If you were faced with such a situation, could you truly refuse the demon's offer? How terrifying! Bruto shuddered. Do those deities just stand by and watch their followers be tempted by demons? It is said that according to the contract signed between the demons and the god of the dead, demons cannot deceive these newly deceased souls and must fulfill their promises to mortals. Paladin's expression was very serious. Unlike the contracts that tempt mortals to become fallen, agreements signed in the domain of the vague must be executed with honesty and in full. What do you mean? Are there issues with their agreements with mortals in general? The issues are numerous. Demons are experts at playing with words. Paladin sat up straight. Take a few examples, such as promising to prevent your body from aging, by turning you into a stone statue, or promising to reveal an important secret, but whispering it in your ear while you're asleep, willing to offer you a large fortune, but killing you immediately after handing it over. When dealing with demons, you'd best have a team of lawyers examine every punctuation mark to ensure there are no loopholes for wordplay, or terms written with invisibility potion. Even then, don't expect to gain any advantage from a deal with a demon. A fair exchange is the best outcome you can hope for. I detest any text longer than 3 sentences, including what you've just said. Bruto sighed and slumped back into the couch. Priest, what's your take on this? Selling your soul for the benefit of others may be a noble act, Alamir shrugged, but compared to the price paid, it's absolutely not worth it. What happens to those souls who have signed a contract with demons? Bruto asked, and Lancelot was also very curious. I'm not sure about that. Paladin shook his head. No one has ever lived to tell of their experiences. Most likely they become slaves of demons or something of the sort. Ah, I happen to know about this. A skull-shaped encyclopedia spoke up. these souls are immediately sent to one of the layers of the 9 hells, depending on who the boss of the demon agent you made a deal with is. There, souls undergo torments 10 times more brutal than the extreme limits of what mortals can imagine, horror sufficient to strip away the humanity remaining in the soul, and during this process, release some kind of energy that flows to the Archduke of that layer of hell. And then, Bruto looked like he didn't enjoy hearing this, yet he couldn't help wanting to know more details. Once the last trace that could be called human is peeled away by the torturer, what's left of the soul, like an empty husk drained dry, is thrown into a deep pit full of maggots, where the soul is filled and reborn as a lesser demon, the lowest existence among all demonic forms, and completely forgets everything about their mortal life. What did Enrise mean by offering me a contract that would satisfy me? Lancelot asked out of pure curiosity. Since demons in the domain of the vague must remain honest, could it possibly promise to exempt me from this torment? Ekmund fell silent for a while, as if sifting through the knowledge in his mind, before he spoke. As far as I know, no, but demons can promise to make the process as brief as possible, avoiding any unnecessary amusement. Moreover, demons might promise to free you from the form of a lesser demon as soon as possible, knowing that being a lesser demon, you are constantly suffering intense physical pain. I see. Lancelot nodded. Paladin, Ekmund, thank you both, this is all very valuable information. Don't mention it, I know very little about Barto Hell, it's Ekmund who has more extensive knowledge, Paladin said somewhat sheepishly, scratching his head. I should ask him for advice more often in the future. Enjoy more content from Empire. I'm not obliged to answer any of your questions, you know. Ekmund grumbled dissatisfied, but it's a different story for the boss. Ask me anything you want to know, don't be shy. In that case, I have another question I want to ask you, Lancelot said, causing the skull to pause in its expression. Today at Tajana's place, what did Yaduz talk about regarding the demon's second group army? What does that mean? Oh, that, I know about that. Ekmund seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Demons have 3 group armies, most of the soldiers in the first group army are high-rank Bartes, they are the elite forces of the 9 hells. In war, they are the first to charge into the enemy's lines, carrying out those outright suicidal missions. Despite this, serving in the first group army is considered a very high honor for demons. Their commander is a Rusur, a deep hell demon refiner. Is this a Rusur one of the 8 archdemons? Bruto asked curiously. Paladin had mentioned this term in their chats earlier. They were said to be the 8 noble demons responsible for all blood warfare affairs. No. These frontline commanders still have to follow the orders set out by the archdemons. The archdemons also have many responsibilities in intelligence, diplomacy, military supply, and more. Remember, fighting is just a small part of warfare. Lancelot could relate to this, but he was more eager to know about the second group army, especially since he had surely made certain enmity with them, particularly after that slap before parting. Paladin had once mentioned that when you fight with a demon, you are only hostile to that individual demon, but when you attack a demon, you are practically challenging all demons collectively. While this statement could be intentionally spread by demons, as the person involved, he had to be cautious. The second group army is the naval force of the demons. Almost all types of demons can be seen in this group army. They are not only responsible for transporting demonic legions through the Stygian River but are also excellent in both offensive and defensive strategies that rely on the Stygian River. The skeleton continued to share its knowledge with everyone. Indeed, there are quite a few seducing demons serving as senior commanders in this group army, their wings giving them a distinct advantage in traversing the Stygian River. I understand, Lancelot nodded. According to Yaduz's judgment, this army that attacked Oasis Fort was the Naval Marine Corps of the demons. If they could move silently through the Stygian River, then it would explain how the demonic forces could suddenly appear outside of Oasis Fort. Chapter 136. As for the 3rd Army Corps, they are either Bruto's cannon fodder or his main force, depending on how you see it. Seeing that Lancelot had no further questions, Ekmund continued, this army is composed of a large number of low-rank demons and is looked down upon in demon society, but don't underestimate them. With iron discipline and excellent command, the 3rd Army Corps often achieves a terrifying casualty ratio in battle. It was precisely because of their distinguished military achievements that their former commander, Bayer, was able to be promoted to the Lord of the first layer of the 9 hells, Avernus, and become the supreme commander of the 3 demon armies. Your information seems a bit outdated. Paladin looked at Ekmund strangely. Even I, a scholar holed up in the prime material plane and studying the abyss, know that Bayer has been deposed by Astymos, and the current Archduke of Avernus is Zariel again. An awkward look appeared in the skull's eye sockets as it hastened to defend its mistake. The knowledge in my head doesn't update automatically, is it so abnormal that some of it is outdated? Who is this Zariel? Lancelot couldn't help but ask, why say the Archduke of Avernus again is her? It's said that she was once an angel, at one point imprisoned by her subordinate Bear, but about 100 years ago, it seems like a series of major events occurred across the lower planes, and even time experienced rifts. When everything calmed down, people found that Zariel had reclaimed her position. Paladin looked to the floating skull. I believe Ekmund has more accurate information about her past. What has happened can perhaps also be changed. The skull sighed. Zariel was once an angel in charge of overseeing the Blood War, since this great conflict involves the fate of the entire multiverse. She repeatedly requested the gods to send troops, to take advantage of the demons and devils' fierce fighting, to wipe out these two evil forces in one fell swoop. After being repeatedly denied, she took matters into her own hands, deciding to do it herself, and the result was, naturally, drowning in the vast ocean of the Blood War. Explore more at Empire. So how did she become a great demon archduke? Bruto asked curiously. Astymos witnessed the death of this battle-thirsty angel and sent a special forces unit to find her remains of consciousness under a small hill made of the bodies of Tannery she had killed, Ekmund said with authority. The ruler of the Nine Hells personally resurrected Zariel. Unlike common fallen angels who turn into succubi, Astymos directly promoted Zariel to be a great demon and appointed her as the Archduke of Avernus, the first layer of the Nine Hells, which is also the highest commander on the Devil's side in the Blood War. But that doesn't sound like she fell. Lancelot frowned. It sounds more like a meaningless sacrifice. According to Zariel herself, she never fell. Her legion is the only barrier between the beautiful upper planes and the endless armies of demons, Paladin explained. Pride is the seed of the fallen, Ekmund blurted out, then seemed surprised at his own words. Something sensible occasionally pops out of that leaky jawbone of yours, Bruto joked, causing everyone to burst into laughter. When she insisted that her point of view was correct and refused to listen to others' opinions, she had already started down the path of the fallen. Paladin agreed with Ekmund's point. Moreover, even if she hadn't fallen just after being resurrected by the ruler of the Nine Hells, the long time spent in the company of demons would be enough to corrupt her completely. Dinner's ready. Kola's voice drifted in from the kitchen, interrupting everyone's gossip about the bigwigs of the multiverse, and little Isa was running in and out from the kitchen, bringing dishes of appetizing food to the table. Wow! That smells amazing! Bruto was the first to jump out of the couch and dash towards the dining table. I don't recognize any of these foods, but they sure look good, Paladin also admired. Kola, can you maybe wait until after we finish eating to explain what all these are? Ha ha ha, don't worry, there's nothing too strange. The halfling's smile seemed a bit forced, so everyone decided not to delve into the details behind that kind of smile. Sir Lancelot, please tell us about your adventure this time. Little Isha, who had just set the table, had already taken her seat and was looking forward to Lancelot's tale with some anticipation. Story time around the table was this little vampire's favorite part. I could talk about this experience for days, Lancelot laughed heartily. Let's first take a look at what we've got this time. It's a perfect chance to divide the spoils while we eat. Oh! Bruto and Paladin cheered simultaneously. Even Alamir couldn't help but show a smile. Isha was full of expectation, only Kola was still unclear about the situation. What are you standing around for? Come help me move these sofas, Lancelot said cheerfully, and Paladin and Alamir immediately rose to help. Bruto sneakily grabbed a piece of meat of unknown origin from the plate and stuffed it into his mouth before scampering over. The group cleared a large space. Lancelot stood in the center and carefully turned the dimensional bag, which collected the spoils, inside out. With a swoosh, everyone's eyes were briefly blinded by a sudden burst of light. When their vision returned, the previously empty floor was now covered with a dazzling array of treasures. A whole little mountain of gemstones that Lancelot and Bruto had collected. The magical equipment dotted around it was Paladin's victory hall. He had no time to choose carefully, picking solely based on the strength of the magic aura, probably mixing up quite a few items with powerful curses. The beautiful and luxurious works of art were brought out by Alamir. His goddess taught followers to acquire all kinds of beautiful things, wherever and whenever they discovered them. With a clatter, Kola's fork dropped to the floor, and Isha's condition was similar, both their faces full of shock. Just as Lancelot was somewhat proudly admiring everyone's expressions, his own face suddenly changed. A blue-white light flared up without warning next to the dining table, and a beautiful figure emerged from the teleportation magic. Tajana's voice filled the room. Lancelot, I came to remind you about that N-ray. What the hell is all this? The succubus lord was dumbfounded as she stared at the heap of blinding treasures, equally overwhelmed. Good evening, Tajana. Lancelot's tone sounded incredibly resigned. Have you eaten yet? Chapter 137. No, not exactly. What are you doing? Where did you get all this stuff from? Tajana, a demon lord who had seen her fair share of grand appearances, quickly composed herself after the initial shock. Where else? The treasure vault of the succubus palace. Lancelot shrugged his shoulders. We were just about to have a meal, planning to tell little Isa about this adventure while distributing these spoils of war. Oh? Is that so? Tajana circled the huge pile of treasure, her eyes spinning non-stop. That goblin and werewolf are my subordinates, right? Indeed they are. They're very satisfied with the payment I gave them. The information about the succubus palace was provided by me, correct? Correct, but we found the vault ourselves, and that succubus guard inside was taken down by us as well. Samantha was killed by you? Not bad, not bad. The one responsible for backing you up, Yaduz, he lost all his men and suddenly became a lone commander. How pitiful. That doesn't seem to be my fault, does it? I don't care. The succubus lord grabbed Lancelot by the collar forcefully and said righteously, looking up, I must have a share of these war spoils. All right, you do have your merits here. Gazing at the face so close to his, Lancelot struggled to suppress the urge to kiss Tajana's red lips and reluctantly nodded. Tajana still clutched tightly onto Lancelot's collar as if she hadn't heard what he said until Bruto cleared his throat softly, and then she turned her head blankly toward the dwarf. Shall we eat first? Bruto looked innocently at the succubus lord. All these delicious dishes are going to get cold. Kola is the chef of the succubus palace, very famous indeed. Lancelot took a step back discreetly. Would we have the honor of dining with you this evening, my lady? Only then did Tajana look towards the dining table, her eyes full of disdain as she flatly refused. It's not necessary, hurry up and divide the spoils. My time is very precious. Didn't you have something to discuss with me? We can talk while we eat. Lancelot's voice sounded very sincere, and this meal is also part of the spoils. It cost us over 1,000 gold coins. What? Why is it so expensive? Tajana frowned upon hearing this. You mortals are so eager to squander all your wealth before you die, aren't you? Despite her words, she had already taken a seat at the head of the table. Lancelot, whose spot was taken, could only helplessly sit at the first seat to Tajana's right, while little Isa dutifully filled everyone's glasses with wine, except for herself, partly because she had to drink the beverage specially prepared for her by Paladin, and partly because at 15 years old, she wasn't technically of age, although time had already lost its meaning to her. Thank you. Tajana nodded to Isa, saying somewhat awkwardly. Ladies and gentlemen. Lancelot stood up with his wine glass. Let us toast to our lord, the ruler of Twin Bridges town, the beautiful and noble Lady Tajana. May her Twin Bridges town flourish forever. Everyone raised their glasses to Tajana, and the succubus lord, somewhat awkwardly, responded in kind, drained the liquor in her glass in one gulp, and then picked up a fork to spear a piece of meat from the nearest plate and threw it into her mouth. This scorpion-tailed lion's nape meat is really well done. Tajana's eyes suddenly lit up, and she used her fork to pick up a bunch of vegetable that looked like seaweed and tasted it. This sea hag's hair is great, too. Haha, I'm glad you like it. The dishes I made in the succubus palace always received high praise from the guests, Kola said, clearly delighted to hear Tajana's compliment, but, could you not mention the names of these ingredients? The others might not be ready to accept them. Upon hearing this, the succubus lord glanced at Lancelot and noticed that the human knight's complexion was indeed a bit weird. She snorted, you mortals are all so hypocritical. What's the difference between this and chickens, ducks, cows, and sheep? Or is it that the taste is better if the creatures can't fight back? Lancelot wisely did not debate this issue with the succubus lord. And although Tajana was unabashed in her speech, she indeed stopped mentioning the names of the ingredients for the remainder of the time. It was obvious that she was indeed enjoying her meal, truly deserving of being the head chef of the succubus palace, although it seemed that Kola was the only chef there. Tell me about your little adventure this time, the complete process from start to finish, said Tajana, eyes on the food, but she obviously hadn't forgotten the main issue. A memorable experience, I hope the story will please you. Lancelot lifted his glass and gently sipped the wine claimed to be from Shendiravir, beginning with their arrival at the Oasis Fort. When it came to sneaking into the Succubus Palace, under Tigana's strong insistence, he eventually put on the transformation ring in front of the Succubus Lord. Wow! Little Issa looked away after a mere glance, her face flushed with embarrassment. Lancelot had just been wearing a casual shirt, and upon putting on the transformation ring, it turned into an extremely provocative sheer garment. Even Tigana had a weird expression on her face, her eyes fixed on Lancelot's enlarged part, her hand unconsciously reaching out as if to confirm its authenticity. What are you doing? Lancelot instantly took off the ring, watching the succubus warily. TCH, boring. Tigana pouted, continue. Lancelot went on to describe how they discovered the treasury, and the astonishing vast treasure within. Undoubtedly, his words held conviction, as the best part of the story was right before their eyes. Just thinking about Molo's expression right now fills my heart with sweetness, Tigana said with a sultry look at the human knight, but what's the deal with Samantha? Did you really kill her? Lancelot described the succubus' final fate, but Tigana furrowed her brows. Something's not right, the teleportation magic shouldn't have been effective. The succubus lord tapped her fingers lightly on the table, her sharp claws unconsciously extending from the tips, a habit she had when deep in thought. Lancelot had learned. Continue your journey with Empire. Are you saying she might not be dead? Bruto asked in surprise, but her body was, like that. A body is just a shell, said Tigana with disdain. A powerful tannery can split off a small portion of their life essence to create a container, so when we are killed within the abyss, we can resurrect using this amulet. Considering Samantha's relationship with Molo, she would certainly have the resources to make such an amulet. Lancelot let out a sigh within his heart, it seemed he had gained another enemy. He had actually suspected this, having absorbed some demon power from the evil spirit demon he had killed, though he didn't know why that happened. Yet, when he killed the more powerful succubus, that phenomenon didn't occur, which made him doubt whether that malicious woman with an octopus growing from her back was truly dead. Chapter 138. But you don't need to worry about her seeking revenge. Tajana looked as though she wasn't too concerned. She's very weak after being resurrected, and her position is a coveted one. Her first priority is to secure her own place, not to go after an unknown succubus. How does the bureaucracy in Shendiravir function? Paladin asked curiously. An opportunity to directly question a succubus lord was rare. I don't know, nor do I care. With graceful poise, Tajana speared another tentacle-like piece of food, noticing Lancelot watching her. The succubus lord covered her mouth with her other hand, but left a gap just large enough for Lancelot to see through. She then stuck out her long, supple tongue and rolled the food from the fork into her mouth. This suggestive and extremely provocative gesture forced Lancelot to look away involuntarily. Tajana laughed out loud as if she had won a victory, leaving those around her who were unaware of what had transpired looking at one another in confusion. It's just a game for me, Ken shut to pass the time. The well-humoured succubus lord added a few more details. The succubus who sat on the razor throne with the help of baboons finds life dull without rivals. The courtly intrigue at the heart of Tearing is a drama she willingly indulges in. As the lover of a demon prince, very few adversaries can truly threaten her, so she stirs up various plots in her own court for her amusement. Tajana's expression showed utter disdain, but if Ken Shut's rule is as she described, then her contempt was understandable, even by mortal standards. As a lord, Tajana was commendably capable, and that was saying something considering she was in the abyss, where half of her subjects were ruthless demons. Your relationship with this queen of the succubus seems, Bruto began, pausing as he remembered to mind his words, not very amicable. Who says? Tajana glanced at the young dwarf. I love our queen with all my heart, as you can tell from my cordial relationship with Molo. Continue with what you were saying, what was that about a bone demon? Lancelot thus continued the narrative of their entrance into the slave pen. Tajana was impressed with the way they destroyed the gate, and little Isa trembled at the description Lancelot gave of the bottom of the mass grave but couldn't help wanting to hear more. When it came to the fight in the secret passage of the mass grave, Tajana had a heap of questions, the style of the steel demon armor and weapons, the sequence of spells cast by the bone demon, and the words spoken with emotion by the demons. Throughout this process, Lancelot found that he could recall all the details clearly. He practically replayed the entire battle. After Lancelot concluded his description, Tajana fell silent in thought again. After a brief pause, the succubus lord encouraged Lancelot to continue, detailing the final battle against Enrise. Lancelot focused on the enchantress moves, words, and equipment, intentionally downplaying his own strength in the account. This wasn't too difficult since he had merely slipped away from Enrise, and the only witness, Ekmund, very tactfully kept silent. Grycia? This Enrise claimed to be a servant of Grycia. Tajana's expression changed the moment she heard the name. She also saw through your transmutation spell directly. Ekmund also walked off with her sword. Lancelot felt a vague sense of foreboding. Is there anything special about this Grycia? She's the most special of all the great demons. Tajana glared at Lancelot irritably, because her daddy is a Stymos, the actual lord of the nine hells. You really know how to land yourself in trouble. Bring out that sword. Ekmund looked at Lancelot, who nodded. Reluctantly, the skeletal head opened its mouth, and a gem-studded, magnificent longsword was regurgitated bit by bit. Tajana gracefully extended her arm, and the longsword silently flew into her hand. This act, seemingly a minor magic trick, shocked Paladin so much that he leaped from his chair, his face filled with disbelief. What's the matter? Lancelot looked at the scholar quizzically. As the only arcane caster in their small adventure group, Paladin shouldn't have had such a strong reaction. Did you just, directly charm this sword? Paladin appeared terrified. How is that possible? Discover hidden stories at Empire. Instead of answering the question directly, Tajana gave the scholar a charming smile, and Paladin's consciousness blurred. By the time he regained his senses, he was already seated back in his chair. As long as your charm is high enough, it's possible, Tajana declared. And this sword is not ordinary at all. She tapped the blade gently, and a bit of magic power flowed from her fingertips into the treasured sword, causing a line of burning text to appear on the blade. That's heaven's language! Paladin exclaimed again in surprise. Does it mean glory is my mission? Correct, Tajana nodded. This sword is very ancient, probably a witness to the initial fall of the Enrise, and has developed a mind of its own to some extent, which is why it was affected by my charm. This item must be quite valuable, Lancelot said with a grim face. That succubus named Valtira is surely going to be after me relentlessly now. From the moment you disrupted their plan to conquer Oasis Fort, those Bartes have been relentless. By the way, I saw the retreat of the Bartes forces in the divination crystal before coming here. The plan to strike at Oasis Fort is utterly ruined, Tajana said playfully, looking at Lancelot. As a mercenary, getting involved in bloody battles is inevitable, but making dozens of high-ranked demons face degradation punishment right off the bat is showing off a bit too much. Lancelot didn't say a word and simply stared at Tajana, who couldn't find the expression of fear on his face she was expecting, which felt somewhat disappointing to her. I'm taking this sword, Tajana said as she tucked the succubus's treasured sword into an elegant dimensional bag at her waist. I'll declare that I saved Oasis Fort, which should transfer the Bartes' attention onto me, and this sword will be the most convincing piece of evidence. The hostility of demons is too burdensome for mortals like you, but it makes no difference to me. Thank you, my lady, Lancelot said softly, his expression very sincere. Tajana seemed to want to say something sarcastic, but after seeing Lancelot's earnest face, she swallowed the words back down. She stood up and walked towards the heap of spoils of war, casually picking a few items that emitted an eerie glow and stowed them away. You won't need these anyway, so I'll take them. Keep a low profile for a while, and don't wander off. The succubus lord waved her hand and cast the teleportation technique again. In the moment before her figure disappeared, Tajana's voice resounded directly in Lancelot's heart. Dinner was nice. Chapter 139. Wow, that's Tajana, said the halfling who had been nervous all along, finally relaxing. Although she looks fierce, I'm pretty sure she enjoyed the dinner. It's easy to tell, Bruto observed the piles of empty plates in front of him. She almost ate a third of it by herself. Isn't her stomach bursting? Sister Tajana is actually not fierce at all, Isabella whispered in defense of the succubus lord. Food disappears into a demon's stomach as if it goes directly to the core of the abyss through a portal. Researchers have always suspected that there's a portal going straight to the core of the abyss inside their stomachs, Paladin said with a smile, but this really was a fantastic dinner, Kola, thank you. You must not have had enough, the halfling jumped up from his chair. Don't worry, I still have dessert here. Who wants a couple of flowing heart tarts? Me. Everyone spoke up simultaneously, except for a certain distracted knight and his jawbone-leaking skeletal servant. I need to figure out a way to get a body soon, Ekmund lamented, watching others, Eating seems like such a fun, meaningless activity. These cookies are fantastic. Bruto almost instantly ate his share. Lance, if you're not planning on eating yours, it's going to be mine, okay? Are you okay? Alamir looked at Lancelot with some concern, still worried about the revenge of the demon that Tajana mentioned. He's probably thinking about Tajana herself. Bruto crossed his arms and sighed, I just can't appreciate those types without beards. Lancelot? Tajana. The elf looked quite shocked, then suddenly his expression turned a bit strange. Is that why the succubus lord suddenly visited? How far has their relationship progressed? This gossipy topic piqued everyone's curiosity. Even Ekmund was surprised enough to drop his jaw, and the inquisitive looks in little Isabella's and Cola's eyes could have bored holes into Lancelot. So far, it's completely one-sided on his part, Paladin explained. It's not hard to imagine, he's definitely not the only male subdued by Tajana's charm. Pfft! Ekmund was the first to express dissatisfaction. Boss, what are you doing? I swear by the crown of my head, absolutely no succubus would reject you. Your power, your muscles, your essence, they adore all that. Don't worry about getting addicted, even if it's with a succubus, you'll cool down after it's over. The only thing to be wary of is their kiss. Weren't you suffering from amnesia? How do you know so much? Lancelot looked at the skeleton irritably but couldn't help but ask, what's with their kiss? Succubus draws energy through their kisses, which is fatal for mortals. Paladin answered Lancelot's confusion. It is said that you can derive no satisfaction from their kisses, the only experiences are the pain they inflict on you, and the immense emptiness. The strength of their draining kiss is probably equivalent to being smashed 5 times with full force by a hammer wielded by Bruto, but I don't think such a kiss would kill you. Alamir looked at Lancelot, and I have reason to believe that, given your constitution, a succubus might not even be able to draw any energy from you. Thanks, that does sound really reassuring, Lancelot said, but his expression said otherwise. This is bad, Bruto shook his head, this guy isn't just lusting after her body, he's really in love with her, which is really bad. I am drawn to everything about her. Lancelot opened up to his friends, how can you not like her? It's obvious, she is inherently charming, and she has always been so kind to us. I try to remind myself that she is a demon, the most skilled at tempting mortals to fall, but I can't fool my own heart. So far, neither her way of governing nor her actions could be done better by me, and Twin Bridges town under her rule is almost the only place in the abyss where a human glow still burns. I can find no reason to dislike her. What's so hard about finding a reason? Bruto raised his chin proudly, she doesn't have a beard. I understand your pain, Alamir, unlike the dwarf, looked very serious, showing no intention of mocking Lancelot. Although I've had countless encounters with succubi just for fun, I can't help you much. The only advice I can give you is to forget that she's a succubus, and do not impose any moral burdens on yourself. Listen to the true voice of your heart, be honest with yourself, and then you can be honest with her, which is essential for true love. But what if demons are incapable of feeling love? Lancelot's voice sounded somewhat desperate, does that mean any effort is in vain? The power of true love is beyond your imagination. The elf's expression was very calm, but these words were indeed at the core of Shinai priests' beliefs. Such feelings can arise in the hearts of any intelligent race, a power capable of contending with any magic or divine power. Your journey continues on Empire. I hope so, Lancelot sighed, his expression appeared much more relaxed, but Paladin is right, so far it has been unrequited love, and even if a demon's heart could be ignited by the flames of love, it would certainly require a tremendous amount of effort. Maybe it's not as hard as you think, Alamir raised an eyebrow, she's already come to your house and had dinner with you. And with Kola around, she's bound to come again. Should I start planning the wedding menu right now? Kola suddenly spoke up, making everyone laugh, and the previously somewhat oppressive atmosphere was swept away. All right, let's talk about distributing the loot. Lancelot's expression became serious again. I believe that what will bind our team together in the future is not the spoils obtained in adventures, but I'm also aware that unfair distribution can turn even the closest comrades against each other. Everyone nodded in agreement, and so Lancelot continued. Here's my proposal for the distribution of the loot. All monetary gains are to be evenly distributed, and the acquired equipment will be distributed as needed, and if one day you no longer need it, the income from selling it will also be shared equally. Lancelot looked at Elf Priest, Alamir, I know your fondness for these artworks, you can own them before we sell them, but once sold, the money obtained will also be evenly distributed among everyone. No problem, The elf priest nodded. I will use them to decorate this house. The beauty of art should be appreciated by everyone. I have no intention of monopolizing these exquisite creations. Chapter 140. This sounds great, but we all know that it's not fair. Paladin stared at Lancelot. Although I hate to admit it, you are stronger than all of us, and if we are to judge by merit, at least half of the spoils should belong to you. Ordinary treasure means little to me. Lancelot walked over to the pile of loot, bent down, and picked up an earth crystal. What I need are gemstones like these. They are to me what potions are to others, consumables. But they aren't all that valuable, although they are not common. Bruto shrugged his shoulders, and basically, you're the one who found them among those more precious gemstones. Since you can use them, they might as well all be yours. If it weren't for you, we would have died at the hands of that succubus, not to mention escaping from the demon. Paladin looked at Lancelot very seriously. Sometimes I wonder if you would have it easier without us. To me, you are far more important than you imagine. Lancelot shook his head. A mortal can easily be assimilated by the chaos and evil essence of the abyss, but with you, my dearest friends, we can fight together against these corrupting and fallen forces. Ah, that's really touching. Bruto rushed over from his seat. Let's have a hug of friendship. I think. Before Lancelot could say anything, he was embraced by the sturdy dwarf and found the hug unexpectedly pleasant. He patted Bruto on the back, smiling. All right, I can hardly breathe now. Remember what we said? We will definitely find a way back home. Bruto hugged Lancelot tightly once more before finally letting go. The corners of his eyes seemed a bit moist, but Lancelot was sure he must have seen it wrong. Ahem, the human knight cleared his throat. Paladin, can you identify the properties or curses on these equipment? No problem. The first circle magic identification spell is made for this. This spell can clarify any magical effects and curses attached to an item. Paladin pulled out several scrolls from his pocket. I can cast this spell 4 times a day. It'll take several days to identify everything. Where do you want to start? Does anyone have a preference? After Tajana had taken some, there were still 10 pieces of equipment left on the pile of gemstones, lying there quietly. That hammer, Bruto pointed at a hardhead hammer, that glowing one there, I've had my eye on it for a long time, let's see what effects it has. Paladin nodded, rolled out an identification spell scroll, activated the magic within, and then placed his hand gently on the hammer. This is a rare weapon, the Hammer of Dissolution. Paladin's eyes focused on a spot in the air where there seemed to be nothing, as if reading text invisible to others. When striking a fiend or undead with this hammer, it will also trigger an additional radiant damage, slightly more powerful than a regular priest's holy fire technique. Weaker or critically wounded enemies might even be directly killed by this damage, and when held in hand, it will light up the surroundings like a torch. Wow, it sounds pretty good. Bruto was a bit conflicted, but it seems a bit light, and the hammer I have now is quite good. Can I use it? The elf priest couldn't help but say, it sounds quite suitable for me. Take it then, Bruto said with a chuckle, it's good for self-defense for you, and with it, you could also help deal with the minor fiends. Lancelot also nodded, and so Alamir stretched out his hand and took hold of the hardhead hammer. The hammer immediately emitted a bright and soft glow when he grasped it, making the original pile of gemstones glitter brightly. Put it down, Bruto grumbled discontentedly, are you trying to blind us? Alamir laughed and put the hardhead hammer away, and the room finally returned to its normal brightness. Let's take a look at this next. Paladin picked up a pair of grey boots and cast an identification spell again. Ah, these are boots of speed. The scholar concluded almost immediately, once you put them on, your movement speed will never be lower than an average human's, and it won't be slowed down by wearing armor or other impediments. These seem very fitting for you, Bruto. But I don't like their name, the dwarf lamented. How about giving them to Kola? That halfling's short little legs could sure use these. Makes sense, Lancelot nodded. Kola, do you like these boots? The halfling ran over excitedly and immediately swapped her boots for the new pair, clearly unconcerned with the implication of cowardice in the item's name. Oh. They really do feel great. Kola ran circles around the table. Haha, it's like my legs have gotten longer. It's not that your legs have grown, but your stride has increased. Lancelot observed Kola's movements for a while before drawing a conclusion. Let's move on to the next item. How about this necklace? This is an amulet of adaptation, Paladin concluded quickly. It allows the wearer to breathe normally in any environment and provides advantages against various magically created noxious gases. I don't need it, Lancelot shook his head. Does anyone else need it? Both Bruto and Alamir shook their heads in turn. Kola seemed interested but felt she shouldn't take another item since she had already taken the boots. Then I'll take it for myself. As a normal human, I don't have much resistance to toxins, Paladin said with a smile, taking the necklace. Besides, with it, I won't have to worry about gagging on foul odors when casting spells. Where shall we use the last identification spell of the day? Lancelot's gaze scanned the remaining items before he picked one out. Let's look at this belt. Wait a moment, Paladin again cast the identification spell, placing his hand on the belt, but after a short while, he threw the belt to Bruto with a strange expression. Dwarf, this belt is yours. Bruto caught the belt with a puzzled face. How can you be so sure I'd like it? What does it do? It's a rare magical item named the Dwarf Belt, most likely crafted by a dwarf, Paladin explained. It significantly strengthens your constitution, but not beyond that of a young dragon. It grants knowledge of the dwarven language, dark vision, and resistance to poison like a dwarf. Additionally, the wearer will appear especially charming in the eyes of dwarves. Well, the belt is quite stunning, but these effects are also great for you. Why must it be mine? Because it has one very special property. The scholar seemed to be holding back a laugh. Wearing it gives you a 50% chance each day to grow a dwarven-style beard. If you already have a beard, it will make your beard noticeably longer and thicker. By Moradin. Bruto let out a delighted shriek. Are you sure this is only a rare item? This is a divine artifact. Paladin rolled his eyes. He knew this would be Bruto's reaction. Lancelot had long expressed no interest in growing a beard, and he didn't want one either, while none of the elves sported facial hair. For Kola and little Isha, the two females, this was more like a terrifying curse. Thank you all, I'll happily take the belt, Bruto beamed as he immediately put on the belt, then added a bit reluctantly, if any one of you needs it, I'm not opposed to lending it for a couple of days. Hey. Chapter 141. After Paladin used up his first ring spells, he temporarily couldn't continue the equipment appraisal. However, even without a master of equipment appraisal, there was still a master of gemstone appraisal. Bruto, who had obtained the dwarf belt, was in a very good mood and energetically began appraising the gemstones for everyone. For a dwarf, they could almost glance at a gemstone and roughly estimate its value, and this sort of activity, akin to counting money, obviously brought him great joy. Of course, Kola was also very enthusiastic about it. While Bruto sorted the gemstones into several small piles based on their value, he introduced the types of gemstones to everyone. The gemstones worth around 10 gold coins included blue crystals, malachite, turquoise, and others, which Bruto didn't even bother with due to their low value. Those worth 50 gold coins included various agates, moonstones, zircon, and gemstones worth 100 gold coins included amber, jadeite, and amethyst. Because of their moderate value, these gemstones were highly popular among merchants and were the most collected type during this trip. As for those valued at 500 gold coins, there were ice crystals, yellow jade, black pearls, these were quite rare. Up the scale were sapphires, emeralds, opals, each worth a whole 1,000 gold coins, and those exceeding 5,000 gold coins included diamonds, rubies, black sapphires, which were even more uncommon. This time they found only 2 rubies, and Bruto swore they were the only 2 in the entire treasure vault, which he had pocketed right away. So it seemed, although they had amassed a considerable quantity this time, most of them were merely trade gemstones, valued at 50 or 100 gold coins. The gemstones they found after slaying the sandworm appeared to be of a higher value. In the end, they tallied up the gemstones they had harvested to be worth approximately 80,000 gold coins, a number so large that even the elf priest was breathing heavily. Eventually, Lancelot suggested they each take gemstones worth 10,000 gold coins, with the rest to be used as team funds for expenses such as rent, spellcasting materials, and food. I've never seen so much money in my life, Kola said, holding her share of the gemstones with a somewhat overwhelmed expression, but here, what can I even use this money for? The halfling's words made everyone feel a bit deflated. Wealth had very limited use in the abyss. Lords needed money to buy equipment, pay troops, and recruit new soldiers, but ordinary people could buy very limited things with money. Twin Bridges town was already one of the more active neutral towns for trade in the first layer of the abyss, but even so, the price of food here was more than 10 times that of the prime material plane, and the choices were very limited. However, some specialties only available in the lower planes were quite affordable, like worms with human faces, deadly poisons that could even bring down demons, and various strongly addictive hallucinogens. But clearly, these items were of no use to them. "But just looking at these gemstones makes me so happy," said little Isha happily, holding a small bag of gemstones which were Lancelot's logistics funds for her. "I really have to think about what I can do with these stones," Molo said, also holding his share of gemstones. "Maybe I should find a blacksmith to make some false teeth." "Good idea, I think it's best to spend the money on arming ourselves," Lancelot suggested. "Who knows what awaits us in this dangerous place in the future?" Everyone nodded in agreement. Since the night had just fallen and it wasn't time to rest yet, they all sat on the living room sofa and began to chat leisurely. "Lancelot, why do you have the blessing of the elves?" Suddenly, Alamir asked Lancelot a question that had piqued his curiosity. Back in the succubus palace, it was this very blessing, which only kind-hearted elves could detect, that made him trust Lancelot was there to rescue him. "That's a long story," Lancelot said, picking up his cup. "Are you sure you want to hear it?" "I want to hear it," Isha blurted out, but after saying so, she seemed to think it wasn't very ladylike and shyly lowered her head. Everyone was amused by Isha's adorable gesture. Lancelot laughed and shook his head, then slowly began to speak. "I come from a world called Gaia, and at the time of my birth, the entire human world was ruled by an evil and cruel royal family, and magic and elves only existed in legends and stories." Lancelot slowly narrated the story of his early life. As the second son in his family, he underwent knight training, and later followed the leadership of Albert to join the rebellion against the Faris Empire. During this process, elves and magic, both long thought to be non-existent, appeared one after the other. His story lasted for a long time, finally ending at the moment he stepped into the portal. What followed was a long silence from everyone in the living room. "This emperor is really despicable." Little Isha couldn't hold back any longer, puffing up with anger as she said, "The kingdom and its subjects should be the ones an emperor serves. This Turas has got it totally backwards." "That Albert doesn't deserve your allegiance," Bruto commented. "The appeal of a leader comes from the determination to achieve a goal, and it was in order to overthrow that so-called Emperor Faris that you all gathered under his banner. If it's just for the sake of fighting over some benefits, then what's the difference between you and a band of highwaymen?" "Thank you, but unfortunately, Albert didn't understand this, and at that time, neither did I. This is what's so strange about you humans." Bruto spread his hands out and slumped back into the sofa. "Did you just mention that the elf high priest who blessed you had experienced a war thousands of years ago?" Alamir's point of interest was different from the others. "Now that you mention it, I realize." Paladin murmured, "How could that be possible? Is there a problem?" Lancelot asked in surprise. "We elves do live very long lives." Alamir seemed to be pondering something, but under normal circumstances, the average lifespan of an elf is only about 700 to 800 years, and few elves live beyond 1,000 years old. "How can that be? Aren't elves immortal and ageless?" "All mortals die, it's a natural law, unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless there is still a living tree of life in your world." Alamir's gaze became somewhat distant. "Legend has it that elves originated from a home world called Faerlil, and Corellin Larathion, the chief deity of the elves, created the first elves from the tender branches of the tree of life. The elves once established a very glorious magic empire, colonizing countless worlds from Faerlil and always bringing with them seeds of the tree of life because as long as the tree of life was present, elves would not age." "What happened after that?" Bruto asked curiously. "When did you tree dwellers become mortal?" "Due to some disaster long forgotten, the connection between other worlds and Faerlil was severed. I'm not clear about other worlds, but in the one I came from, the tree of life was destroyed in a terrible magical accident thousands of years ago, blasting the entire continent into several pieces, thanks to those self-righteous highborn elf wizards." Alamir shrugged helplessly. "Since then, elves were no longer immortal and undying. This is why I'm so shocked. Maybe the disaster of the demon invasion taught the elves in your world a good lesson, making them retain a sense of reverence while exploring the unknown." Chapter 142. Afterward they discussed some other matters, but as they were not particularly relevant to Lancelot, he did not listen closely. His thoughts remained fixed on his hometown. The words of Alamir gave him much to ponder but left him with even greater confusion. The world from which he hailed seemed truly unique, as there, death was final, and the living could never understand what lay beyond. Elves were like deities, capable of immortality, yet they had scarcely made themselves known in human history. Deities had never directly revealed their existence to mortals, a mystery that was equally confounding. According to Paladin and Alamir, the faith of mortals was one of the significant sources of divine power for the gods and even related to the very survival of a deity, which made it unthinkable for them to ignore a large group of unclaimed souls. The sole explanation was that his hometown might be located behind some sort of barrier or that it didn't even belong to the current multiverse, which is why those beings of divine power couldn't interfere with his world. However, the goddess of the moon, Surin, worshipped by the elves, is a genuine, well-known deity, making the theory that his hometown is in another universe untenable. According to Paladin, Surin was a goddess born when the universe was created, one of the oldest beings among all deities, second only to the creator god, Ao. Despite her ancient existence and significant origins, she is merely a deity of moderate divine power, who was once a subordinate to the Lady of Love, Shani, for several centuries. All of these resulted from her ongoing struggle with her sister goddess of the night, Sheol, who embodied the primordial darkness and chaos and whose temperament was the complete opposite of her inherently kind and peaceful sister. The sisters' conflict began at the dawn of creation and has continued to this day. As eons passed, Sheol grew stronger and accumulated more divine offices encompassing night, darkness, caverns, the dungeon, oblivion, secrets, and many other potent portfolios, while Surin's offices dwindled to only include the moon, the stars, and a few insubstantial ones like navigation, wanderers, and non-evil lycanthropes. But these matters were too remote for him. Perhaps one day when he can traverse the stars and planes on his own strength, he might uncover the special truth of his hometown world. After a while, fatigue set upon everyone, and they each retired to their rooms for rest. Little Isha, however, donned a modest set of leather armor and went off to train under her vampiric elder. According to her, the training was to take place in Tajana's castle, and with big sister Tajana around, there was absolutely no need to worry about her safety. Once the room became completely quiet, Lancelot sat cross-legged on his own bed and began his daily cultivation. It took some time to enter the state of cultivation tonight because he would occasionally have to stop and recite the ice heart technique to banish the image of a succubus twirling a forkful of food into her mouth with her tongue from his mind. Once he entered the state, though, Lancelot settled his mind completely and repeatedly performed circulation transfer. The process of cultivation was monotonous, akin to scooping a small spoonful of water from a river, walking a mile to pour it into a water jar at home, and then repeating the process endlessly. The true chi within him had been greatly depleted in the battles of the past 2 days, and despite replenishment from upper-grade spirit stones, a night of cultivation restored only about 70%. However, to Lancelot's delight, he noticed his water jar seemed to have grown larger, a sign that his realm was on the verge of advancing. He had a feeling that in less than a month, he could enter the late high-rank phase of chi cultivation. It seemed his earlier speculation was correct. Combat on the edge of life and death greatly aided the advancement of one's realm. The recent battle with the succubus and the lust demon was a case in point. Of course, if possible, he still hoped to cultivate in a more secure way. The pressure of death indeed could hasten progress tremendously, but once you failed, the loss would be irremediable. Those who pursued spiritual cultivation aspired for longevity. If in pursuit of eternal life one lost their life instead, wouldn't that be putting the cart before the horse? In the small bamboo slip was left the highly refined life experience of Han Tianzun. Make a fortune in silence. Of course, this piece of advice might not be very applicable to Lancelot, because in the abyss, you don't need to seek out danger, danger actively seeks you out. Not to mention the bloody battle being waged right beside him. In Ekman's words, this war that involved the situation of the entire multiverse was as dangerous to avoid as to participate. Lancelot, although spending his days in Hagrid Manor, practicing his companion's combat skills by day and meditating on chi cultivation by night, still received new information every day. The demon's prolonged siege had created an opportunity for the guards of Oasis Fort. After paying a heavy price, a temporary portal leading directly to the 21st layer of the abyss, the 6-fold crematory piles, was opened. A powerful Barlow flame demon was summoned and delivered the final blow to the wavering hearts of the demon legion. When the huge figure of the flame demon appeared atop the city walls, victory became completely impossible for the Bartes. Tajana publicly claimed that her timely support had bought time for Oasis Fort, and the long sword from Enrise served as strong evidence. This significantly boosted her prestige among the demons and also eased the long-standing hostility of Mikan Shut toward her to a certain degree. However, the headache of a side effect was that Molo had a completely different understanding of the event. The male succubus firmly believed it was solid proof that Tajana was in love with him, and his self-esteem, which had been shattered in Twin Bridges town, was restored in a mysterious way. The trade routes passing through Oasis Fort remained open, and as for Molo's enthusiasm, Tajana in the walls of Twin Bridges town was temporarily unaffected. At Volcano Fortress, the sudden introduction of cold iron weapons brought abundant victories to the demons' side. Destruction Flame Visovius's army pushed the front line forward by 100 miles, recapturing several outposts and reversing the previous trend where the front line was gradually being eaten away by the demons. It was said that due to a series of recent defeats, even the commander on the demons' side had been replaced. The Duchess Zareel had bypassed the 8 demon generals and directly intervened in the personnel arrangement. This act, against Bartes tradition, inevitably led to much speculation. After all, it was well known that the 8 demon generals had always been supporters of the former Archduke Bayer, and even after Bayer was dismissed by the Lord of the Nine Hells, their loyalty to the new Archduke Avernus was only to the extent that duty required. Some of this news was heard by Bruto or Colin from taverns and markets, but some were told to Lancelot by Tajana herself. The succubus lord would occasionally bring little Isha back, and Lancelot could take the opportunity to chat with her for a bit. But later on, Tajana seemed to get busy, and it became difficult for Lancelot to hear the latest intelligence from the succubus lord. However, the external situation's changes weren't of much relevance to Lancelot. After spending over a month, he finally achieved a breakthrough to the late high rank of Chi Refinement, officially launching an assault on Foundation establishment. Just when he was starting to miss Tajana's beautiful figure, he suddenly received a message from a succubus maid. "Gather your mercenaries and come meet me immediately, there's a very urgent mission, and you're the best choice for it." Chapter 143. Upon receiving the summons from Tajana, Lancelot's heart muttered discontentedly. What kind of mission would require his presence? Could it be that the succubus lord had discovered the location of an earth crystal or a cold water crystal or some other gemstone he needed and was preparing him for another looting spree? Despite his doubts, Lancelot quickly gathered his companions. He left a note for little Esha, who was still sleeping in her coffin, weighted down with a small bag of gemstones, and then set off for the Red Castle at the center of Twin Bridges town. The companions trailing behind him looked quite different from a month ago. Bruto wore his belt every day, and now his large beard made him appear to be 300 years old, although it was still the fiery red color of a young dwarf, knotted into 3 braids with a thick one in the middle and 2 thinner ones on the sides. Aside from that, he also donned a majestic red cloak. This cloak was more than just decorative, it was one of the spoils they conquered from the succubus palace, which gave the wearer an advantage in resisting spells, a very satisfactory piece of equipment for a dwarf who despised all magic. Colin, on the other hand, had replaced his scroll case with a backpack worn over both shoulders. This, too, was a magical item, but it hadn't come from the succubus palace, rather, Colin bought it from the market for 5,000 gold coins. Such a large sum of money indicated the backpack's extraordinariness. Named the convenient bag by Howard, meaning the inventor was called Howard, it had 3-dimensional pockets, 1 large and 2 small, allowing for storage of approximately 12 cubic feet or 100 pounds of items. This backpack's storage capacity was only about 1/5 that of a dimensional bag, but it had a very special ability. When you wanted to take something out, the first item you touched would be the one you were seeking. This feature was extremely important for a scholar like Colin, who relied on scrolls for casting spells. To be prepared for various situations, they had to carry many scrolls, and searching for the right one among a pile on the anxious battlefield was incredibly awkward. Kola also had the same type of backpack as Colin's, but hers was filled with all sorts of prepared potions, alchemical ingredients, as well as a complete set of cooking utensils, spices, and ingredients. She wore an exquisite suit of dark red leather armor, which she purchased from the market for 3,000 gold coins. Made from the skin of a fire serpent, a creature from the plane of fire elementals, not only did it provide good protection, but it also resisted damage from flames. On her back was a cloak that seemed to endlessly change colors with the surrounding environment. This was yet another spoil from the succubus palace that allowed the wearer to better conceal themselves. Named the elf cloak, it clearly suited halflings more, as Kola, besides being a chef and an alchemist, was also a wanderer, though they say her level wasn't much better than little Esha's. So when Lancelot saw the 2 cold iron daggers strapped to her waist, he wasn't too surprised. Incidentally, those were Bruto's work. Although not the prettiest, the quality was acceptable, and most importantly, Bruto charged her merely a nominal fee for the materials. The halfling was now completely broke. Apart from her leather armor and backpack, alchemy ingredients were also a significant expense, and Kola had a great passion for tasting the delicacies of Oasis Fort. If Lancelot's mercenary group didn't start getting some work soon, she would have to consider whether to look for a job as a cook. Even Ekmund had updated his equipment, a helmet adorned with several small swords arranged into a wing-like decoration, which was also a trophy gained from the succubus palace. Besides providing excellent protection, it had a daily ability. By uttering a command, those small swords comprising the wings would detach from the helmet and transform into sharp long swords, spinning at high speed around the helmet. Additionally, Ekmund's mouth was fitted with a set of false teeth that glimmered with a cold light, another creation of Bruto. After becoming an adventurer, Bruto's enthusiasm for forging only increased, much to the mixed worry and pride of his father. However, the most surprising transformation was that of Alamir. Lancelot had heard that the elf had placed an order for a suit of armor with Bruto's father, and he had assumed it would be a medium armor like scale or chain mail. Instead, the priest was now clad in a new, well-crafted, beautifully designed full-body armor, complete with a thick, covered great helmet, making him look more like a knight than a priest. As long as they can afford it, Shani's priests will dress in the strongest protective armor available, Paladin explained in response to Lancelot's puzzled look. But don't doubt their courage, they are simply risk-takers who want to avoid scars, or the wasteful use of precious healing divine arts on themselves. I actually don't care much about scars, but the teachings of the goddess require believers to take care of their bodies, Alamir's muffled voice emanated from behind the face mask. The design, pattern, and ornamentation of this armor were all my own making, which includes an equilibrium enchantment effect, allowing me to gain a reactive force to stay standing if I'm about to fall, and the cold iron trait also keeps the wearer cool even under the scorching Sunday. That's so good. Make me one too when you have the time. Lancelot praised sincerely. The effects sounded amazing, and indeed, Alamir looked very handsome in it. No problem, I've kept the design sketches, so you can take a look when you'd like, Alamir said cheerily. It's just a bit pricey. It cost me 7,500 gold coins, and Mr. Baron said that it was already at cost price. That expensive? Lancelot exclaimed instinctively. As a knight, he was extremely sensitive to the price of armor. Normally, a knight's full-body armor set would cost around 1,500 gold coins, and even that was often the most valuable possession in a small noble family in the countryside, typically passed from grandfather to father, and father to son. Lancelot, due to his background, actually had little concept of the prices of daily necessities such as bread, eggs, or soap, but this suit of full-body armor finally provided him with a tangible sense of the prices in Twin Bridges town. When Lancelot was young, or any boy who dreamed of becoming a knight, wealth was not measured in gold coins, but in full-body armor. This manor is worth 5 sets of full-body armor, that warhorse a half set, his father's annual income a third of a set, and so on. Fortunately, it was also easier to make money in the abyss. More precisely, there were more opportunities. Besides, apart from spending on purchasing equipment, there really wasn't much else to use it for. During their conversation, the group had already arrived at the gates of Tygana's castle. The berserk demon guards looked at this fully armed party of mortals with unfriendly eyes, but after the succubus who led Lancelot over communicated with them briefly, the berserk demon guards shook their heads, gesturing for everyone to enter. Chapter 144. With the guidance of Tygana's succubus maid, the group didn't linger in the waiting room but went directly to the throne hall. At that moment, the throne hall had been transformed into a military command center. In the very center of the hall, a gigantic sand table was displayed with countless images of demons and demon armies, generated by magic, depicting the situation around Oasis Fort. Next to it was a crystal ball, through which a beam of light passed and projected the scenes inside onto a nearby screen, showcasing a battle between demons and devils. Tygana was discussing something with her 2 6-armed serpent demon generals, but when Lancelot and the others entered the throne hall, she immediately looked up and her gaze met Lancelot's. You've arrived, good, Tygana's voice echoed directly in Lancelot's mind. Irina will take you to the highest room in the North Tower, where the client is waiting. She insists on speaking with you first before deciding whether to entrust you with this mission. Must I accept this mission? You certainly have a choice. Tygana had already withdrawn her gaze from Lancelot, but I believe you will indeed take it. Go and talk to the client, and it doesn't matter if you really don't want to do it, but do not disclose any information about the client. Lancelot nodded, and Tygana didn't send any more mental messages. The succubus maid named Irina then turned her head to Lancelot and said, Lady Tygana has already instructed, please follow me. What's happening? Seeing Lancelot looking like he was about to leave without speaking, Bruto felt a bit puzzled. Tygana just communicated with me via mind link, saying that the client wants to meet us first. Lancelot shrugged, let's go see who this mysterious client is. Exiting the large doors of the throne hall, the succubus maid led the group into an area they had never been to before. After passing through several corridors and corners, they arrived in front of a large door, flanked by 2 humanoid stone statues, each nearly twice as tall as Lancelot. As the succubus maid approached the door, the stone statues suddenly came to life. They stepped forward in unison, causing a dull sound on the floor. Judging from the sound, each statue likely weighed more than a ton. The stone gate's arm reached forward, palms facing the group. The message was clear, no further advancement was allowed. Wow, those are 2 stone golems. Paladin seemed to recognize this odd form of stone persons, and it's obviously dwarf craftsmanship. What are golems? Asked Lancelot, curious, and how can you tell they're made by dwarfs? Because they have beards. Bruto looked at Lancelot as if he was a fool. Golems can be made from stone, steel, or even flesh, and then infused with soul essence from the elemental plane of earth, Paladin explained. Golems have a very high resistance to magic, and their bodies are enhanced. Ordinary weapons can't even leave a scratch on them, not to mention their strength that rivals that of dragons. But most importantly, they have no free will of their own and are absolutely loyal protectors of their masters. Hearing this, Lancelot narrowed his eyes, estimating his chances if a battle were to break out against these stone giants. Lady Tajana has given them permission to pass, the succubus maid shouted to the golems from a safe distance, a distance so far that her call seemed more like a shout. The golems stood silently in their original positions, not reacting at all. Just when the group wondered if something had gone wrong, the golems suddenly stepped back, clearing the space leading to the door. All right, they should have confirmed with Lady Tajana already, Arena sighed in relief. Once you go in, there will be a spiral staircase in the center of the room, and some doors on both sides. These doors all have powerful protective magic, so please go directly to the room Lady Tajana mentioned. Aren't you coming with us? No, her ladyship never allows us to enter, the succubus maid said with a hint of a teasing smile. I'll wait for you here, Sir Lancelot. Lancelot didn't say anything further. He took a deep breath, allowed true chi to envelop his body, and carefully moved forward. As they passed the 2 terrifying stone giants, the golems were as still as real statues, yet the overwhelming aura emanating from them made everyone intensely nervous. Once everyone had passed, the golems suddenly moved, effectively blocking the pathway they had come through. It seems we only have one way forward, Lancelot shrugged his shoulders and laid his hand on the door. Let's see what's inside. With a creaking sound, the heavy stone gate was pushed open. The expressions on everyone's faces were a mix of nervousness and curiosity, but the sight behind the door was somewhat disappointing. Behind the door was a round room, with various scrolls and books scattered all around, and some magical experimental apparatus on the tables. Equipment emanating a faint spiritual light was casually thrown around. Lancelot recognized a few items that were very familiar. They were indeed some of the trophies previously taken by Tajana from their collection at the Succubus Palace. Could this be Tajana's laboratory? Paladin remembered Arena's instructions and obediently stood in place, but his eyes curiously surveyed the surroundings. That's not our concern, Lancelot said as he walked toward the staircase in the center of the room. Don't touch anything. The client awaits us in the room at the very top of these stairs. Everyone nodded and followed him up the winding staircase. The staircase was very tall and initially quite broad, but it narrowed to allow just 2 people to pass side by side. Besides the doors, the walls were adorned with many paintings depicting battles between demons and angels. These paintings imparted an unsettling feeling, but Lancelot was not in the mood to study them closely. After climbing at least 50 feet, they finally reached the top of the staircase. Flickering candlelight came from behind a partially open door, clearly indicating that someone inside was awaiting visitors. Lancelot stood at the doorway and gently knocked on the door. Come in, the door isn't locked, a gentle female voice came from inside the room. There was something enchantingly charming about the voice, making one eager to see the speaker. Lancelot pushed the door open and immediately saw who it was. The owner of the voice was a blonde beauty rising from a chair. A book lay open on the table before her, seemingly used to pass the time as she waited. Lancelot carefully surveyed the client. The woman was as beautiful as an angel, her beauty no less impressive than Tajana's. She had a pair of sky-blue eyes, which matched the color of her knee-length dress. One might say she resembled an angel, given her serene and lovely demeanor, but the elegant bat wings folded behind her clearly identified her as a succubus. She gracefully bowed to the group, and her pleasing voice echoed again. Hello, I am out of favor. I suppose you are the mercenaries Tajana mentioned, she said as she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear due to the bow. May I ask if you are Captain Lancelot? Chapter 145. I am. Lancelot returned a knight's salute. Good afternoon, fallen lady. Is there anything we can assist you with? Indeed, I have a very urgent and dangerous task. The fallen lady nodded her head, her gaze sweeping over the group that filed in with Lancelot. Are these your companions? Yes. Lancelot noticed her gaze lingering on Ekmund for a moment. This skeleton head is called Ekmund, and he is also our companion. Hello there. The skeleton head performed a bow that lacked a body. It seems that you recognize me? I am very sorry, I've lost my memory, otherwise I would never forget a beauty like you. No, but I had a friend who looked a lot like you. The fallen lady smiled gently. I hope you find your memories soon. Long ago, I too embarked on a journey with someone very important to me, in search of his past. If you're willing, we'd be delighted to hear this story. Facing the succubus, Lancelot involuntarily adopted an extremely polite tone. You seem so different from all the succubi we've met before. Please forgive my curiosity, but would you be willing to explain the meaning of fallen? It sounds more like an adjective rather than a name. I understand you have many questions about me, everyone does when they first see me. The succubus smiled again. I've been to many places in the multiverse and ultimately concluded that my kind leads a life that is a waste of time, meaningless. I fell from my race, and some say that was a sort of ascension, but I think fallen feels more accurate. That's the origin of the name, fallen. The words spoken by the succubus before him greatly shocked Lancelot, but he realized it was a very private topic, and to continue discussing it would be extremely impolite. Thus, he nodded and said, Thank you for your explanation, lady. You mentioned you had a commission. Yes, that's precisely why I have come here. The fallen lady nodded, but before that, I must ask a few questions to determine if you are worthy of my trust. Understandable, you've already generously answered my questions, so please ask away. The first question has no fixed answer, but I would like to hear each of your thoughts. What can change a person's essence? Love, Alamir said first, resolutely. Knowledge, the answer undoubtedly came from Paladin. I think it is labor, Bruto said, arms crossed. For me, it's memory. Ekman seemed a bit sad. Had I not lost mine, perhaps I would be a completely different person now. I don't know. Kola looked somewhat embarrassed. Maybe good food. I believe many things can change a person's essence. Lancelot shrugged. It's different for everyone, depending on ourselves. A very impressive answer, the disfavored lady nodded. Only you need to answer the second question, Captain Lancelot. What kind of soul do you think is worth saving? I've never thought about that question, Lancelot admitted. If it were up to me, of course, it would be the kind souls, or at least those who sincerely decide to no longer consort with evil. Even if the soul needing salvation. The disfavored paused for a moment, is a demon. Without a doubt, Lancelot nodded firmly. I can see that in saying this, you actually have someone in mind, the disfavored lady said with an understanding smile. Final question, what's the strongest enemy you have ever defeated? Please do not exaggerate your accomplishments, as I do not wish to send you to your death. We once killed a succubus. However, Tajana said that the succubus likely had a portion of demon essence, so it's very possible she resurrected elsewhere. Lancelot took a pause, deciding not to mention the complications with the demons, and I can assure you, we are stronger now than when we defeated the succubus. A succubus? The disfavored lady pondered briefly. Honestly, it might be a stretch, but I'm afraid I don't have the luxury of finding someone else. What exactly is the mission? Lancelot asked curiously, having understood that this was likely a rescue operation, and the rescuee was probably a demon as special as the disfavored lady before him. You must keep the following information strictly confidential. The disfavored's expression grew very serious. Has anyone here heard of the name Elithisia? I think I've heard my old man mention it, Bruto said, frowning, but I can't remember anything about that name at all. Maybe I should have paid more attention when he was teaching. Most Tannery despise me for my fall, but their hatred towards Elithisia is tenfold what they feel for me. The disfavored lady looked as if she was searching for the right words. She is more extreme than me. After turning away from the path of evil, she chose to become a holy warrior. How is that possible? Paladin looked utterly shocked, the disfavored's words contradicting everything he knew about demons. What made her turn away from the path of evil? Lancelot was more concerned about this. What changed her essence? For Ilithisia, it was the power of love, said the disfavored lady with a smile to Shani the priest, while in the prime material plane, she fell in love with a beautiful angel. Even though her nature resisted this emotion for a long time, she ultimately revealed her true feelings to the angel. The angel saw an opportunity, a chance to redeem a demon. His benevolent nature made him happy to help others. Besides, who could say no to a beautiful and sincere succubus? The disfavored lady smiled again, as if implying something. What happened after that? Kola asked eagerly, did they live happily ever after? Redemption can sometimes happen in an instant, but more often it is the result of many painful years of effort. As a demon, she had to fight against her evil nature every moment of every day. Though the process was excruciating, she eventually learned to find satisfaction and joy in helping rather than harming others. The disfavored's expression turned sad. She also realized how many wrongs she had committed and tried to make amends as much as possible. With the help of her angel lover, she completely expelled her former master, a Barlow flame demon, from the prime material plane. It was then she earned the title of a holy warrior and achieved her precarious redemption. However, in achieving redemption, she also gained an eternal enemy. Her former master couldn't re-enter the prime material plane, but it had many evil minions at its disposal. The disfavored lady's gaze darkened. Ilithisia chose to stay in the prime material plane to help combat evil, and though she survived numerous assassination attempts, the latest plot against her succeeded. The succubus Paladin was killed, and her angel lover was seriously injured. Chapter 146. How could this happen? Bruto clenched his fists tightly. Do you wish us to seek revenge for her, madam? Tell us who her killer is, we must make those people pay. I admire your sense of justice, but things are not as you think. Ilithisia, after all, was a tannery born in the abyss, and when she was killed on the prime material plane, her body was immediately reborn in the abyss. Disfavored shook her head gently at Bruto. When he realized what had happened, that angel immediately came to Mark City to find me, hoping I could help rescue his beloved. Why would that angel come to you? Lancelot asked puzzled. What will happen to this succubus Paladin after she is reborn in the abyss? It's not surprising that the angel would come to me. As one of the few succubi who publicly renounced the ways of the tannery, I have had the fortune to gain the respect of certain groups. Disfavored's face was very calm, showing not a hint of conceit. As for Ilithisia, according to my sources, she has been captured once again. Without intervention, her fate will be only one, to be sacrificed on the cursed stone altar in the Grove of the 12. What is the Grove of the 12? Lancelot was forced to ask again. Is that a place in the abyss? Correct, it is the name of the 12th layer of the abyss. Paladin answered his query. It is said to be a holy land for demons, named after the 12 towering great trees. Under the shade of these giant trees lies a large stone altar, where any evil spell cast upon it has its effect greatly amplified. Your vast knowledge surprises me. Disfavored flashed a smile at Paladin. In ancient times, the tannery invited 12 divine servants of benevolent deities to the abyss under the guise of a peace meeting. Through a series of conspiracies and betrayals, the demons eventually bound these servants to the 12 trees and sacrificed them through an evil ritual, filling that plane with a perpetual energy of evil. Since then, this plane has become a holy land for the tannery, and that altar is meant to commemorate this great deed. I see. Lancelot nodded. What do you need us to do? My source confirms that she has not yet been taken to the Grove of the 12, her former master is there preparing a grand sacrifice ceremony. Although we don't know her current location, there aren't many portals to the 12th layer, and after eliminating other possibilities, we've pinpointed her next destination, the Instant Fortress, the only portal to the Grove of the 12 on the plains of the Abyss. What kind of place is this Instant Fortress? And how do we get there? The Instant Fortress is a bastion of the Doomsday Guard, a mortal faction dedicated to bringing about the ultimate destruction sooner. They believe that demons are the best tool to achieve this goal, and the demons, in turn, are happy to employ these mortals to build warships that can navigate the Stygian River. Disfavored's tone indicated she had no fondness whatsoever for this faction. The fortress is over 2,000 miles from here, and passes through the territories of many demon lords, so going directly is clearly unrealistic. Fortunately, my source has already sent someone who will summon you directly through a summoning ritual. As she spoke, the golden-haired succubus took out a ring from a small bag beside her, and Lancelot realized it appeared to be made of pure gold. There's still a little time before the scheduled summoning, and when that time comes, merely holding this ring will transport you to the instant fortress. Your mission is to rescue Ilithisia before everything becomes irredeemable." Disfavored's blue eyes stared straight at Lancelot, as if peering directly into his soul. "So, do you accept this commission, Captain Lancelot?" The human knight didn't rush to answer but instead turned to look at his companions. Some nodded subtly, while others returned a resolute gaze. Having confirmed that everyone was determined to proceed, he announced the already decided answer. "We accept this commission. Thank you, your courage and kindness fill me with the utmost respect." Having bowed again to the group, he then took out a small pendant and handed it over to Lancelot. Lancelot examined the ornament closely, finding that the pendant bore the half-portrait of a succubus. This was a succubus with jet-black bobbed hair and a striking posture, her delicate face adorned with ruby-like eyes and a pair of slightly curved, half-foot-long horns protruding from her forehead. "Is this a portrait of Ilithisia?" "Yes, but this pendant does more than just help you identify the one you're to rescue." He smiled softly. "This is a magical item crafted by an angel. It will slightly heat up when directed towards Ilithisia, and it works within a range of 300 li. However, only those with good intentions can hold it. Anyone aligned with evil will find this pendant as hot as flames themselves." "That's great. With this pendant, we can prepare in advance," Bruto said excitedly, rubbing his hands together. "I wonder how strong the enemy is." "Unfortunately, I do not know." He looked genuinely apologetic. "I suggest you make full use of this pendant to scout out your target first, then assess the enemy's strength and numbers before launching an attack. We will proceed with caution." Lancelot nodded. "One last question, if we succeed, how do we return? Or where should we take Ilithisia?" "The summoning will end in 7 days, at which point you will be instantly teleported back here. If any of you is holding on to her, she will also be brought back. Ilithisia might reach the instant fortress within 2 or 3 days. After you successfully rescue her, you may need to find a way to endure the wait until the summoning ends." "No need." Tajana's voice suddenly sounded, and everyone turned around to see the succubus lord already at the doorway. She walked in, her usual pride tucked away, and greeted him with a level of respect Lancelot had never heard before. "Good afternoon, madam." She then turned to the human knight, tossing him an amulet bearing the emblem of Twin Bridges Town. "No matter which corner of the abyss you are in, chant my name 3 times facing this emblem, and you will be immediately teleported back to Twin Bridges Town. You can take up to 8 people with you, if they are willing." Chapter 147. "Thank you very much." Lancelot took the amulet, feeling the potent magic energy ready to burst forth, and carefully tucked it into his chest. "Leave early and return soon." Tajana dropped a line, nodded to the fallen once more, and then turned and left through the door from which she had appeared. To Tajana's actions, the fallen seemed somewhat surprised. She thought for a moment, took out a delicately crafted silk pouch, poured from it another amulet resembling a red jade, and handed it to Lancelot as well. This amulet still bore the warmth of the fallen. When Lancelot held it in his hand, the red patterns inside seemed to flow as if they encased a flame. Lancelot cast an inquiring glance at the fallen and spoke. "What is this amulet for?" "When you face an enemy you absolutely cannot defeat, you can use it to summon powerful aid." The fallen gazed at the amulet with a longing look. "To activate it, hold it and whisper softly to it, 'Time is not your enemy.' This amulet seems to hold a special meaning for you." Lancelot hesitated. "I'm not sure if I should carry it with me." "That's why you must come back alive and return this amulet to me." The fallen's eyes showed that she was already lost in her memories. "Many years ago, someone gave me this amulet, just in the same way Tajana just gave that amulet to you. We will definitely bring back both this amulet and Ilithisia," Lancelot assured her, but he had already resolved in his heart that he would never use this amulet unless absolutely necessary. What kind of terrifying existence could sincerely belong to the succubus before him? Imagine summoning her beloved only to have the summoned descend and find that the summoner was a man, perhaps a hasty one who might cleave him in two at first sight. Where would he go to argue his case? "I trust you," the fallen regained her graceful demeanor. "But it seems you have forgotten something." "What?" Lancelot was truly puzzled this time. "You forgot to ask about the reward for this mission." The fallen appeared amused by Lancelot's charming reaction. "That angel probably can't pay you in gold, but he can give you gemstones worth 50,000 gold coins, along with any other reasonable request. If any of you sacrifice yourselves on this mission, as long as you bring back a complete body, he can also resurrect your fallen companion." "Ah, thank you very much." Lancelot scratched his head embarrassedly. As a mercenary, forgetting to inquire about the mission's reward was not a good habit. Just then, the golden ring flashed with a ripple-like radiance, signaling that the summoning was about to start. The group walked over, each taking hold of a part of the ring, Ekmund with his teeth. Madame Fallen bowed to them once more and softly said, "I wish you all the best." Lancelot's vision was gradually filled with increasingly bright magical light, and he felt as though he had suddenly lost weight, floating in the void, but the next moment everything returned to normal. He found himself in a dark underground cave, standing on some complex magic formation, and a human male in tattered robes was standing restlessly in front of them. Judging by the shimmering multicolored light emanating from him, at least a dozen defensive magics were in effect. "Very well, I thought I might summon something worse," the man spoke, his voice much older than his appearance suggested. "Before you speak, listen to me. I was ordered to perform this summoning ritual on the outskirts of the Instant Fortress. Who you are or why you are here is of no concern to me, and I don't wish to know, so I won't answer any of your questions. Now, head back through that entrance to the surface and forget you ever saw me, is that clear?" "Got it." "Stop nagging," Bruto grumbled in response, leading the way out of the cave first. The others shrugged their shoulders and followed the dwarf out. Lancelot kept his expressionless gaze on the man until everyone had left, then he nodded at him and turned to leave. Just as they stepped out of that entrance, the cave behind them thunderously collapsed, burying the secret of their arrival altogether. As for the man who had summoned them there, he surely had another secret passage in the dark corners of the cave through which he had quietly slipped away. Lancelot then surveyed their current surroundings. They were standing on a small hill, and the area around them was still the typical dry, cracked, dust-filled land of the plains of the abyss, with almost no clouds in the sky and the dark red sun a bit higher than it should have been. Not far away on the plains stood a huge and dilapidated stone fortress. Large sections of the outer walls had collapsed, likely unable to provide any defense, and a plethora of low and disordered buildings were scattered around. The fortress itself in the center seemed somewhat intact, but its gates were wide open, completely unguarded. Lancelot's spirit perception suddenly stirred, he turned his head to one side, and Frost Slash was already in his hand. The others were accustomed to his exceptional perception ability, and although the human knight said nothing, they all drew their weapons, ready for the imminent appearance of their enemy. From behind the small hill, a squad of 4 berserk demons emerged. Upon seeing Lancelot and his group, the demons seemed startled, but showed no immediate intention to charge into battle. Instead, they watched them warily and continued advancing toward the fortress. Since the demons didn't initiate trouble, the group wasn't interested in starting a fight out of nowhere. In fact, unlike the terrifying impression they left in the prime material plane, demons in the abyss didn't attack people indiscriminately like madmen, at least those as intelligent as mortals didn't. This was because for most demons, dying in the abyss meant true death. Even though as demons they endured constant terrible pain from their bodies, especially the low-rank demons, most believed that being alive was better than being dead, hence demons in the abyss tended to restrain themselves to avoid unnecessary conflicts, despite their chaotic and impulsive nature. Of course, if they were sure their target couldn't fight back, demons were still very happy to pop a few eyeballs or pull out a few intestines for fun. Lancelot took out the amulet with Ilithysia's portrait, holding it in his palm to feel it. The amulet was ice cold and did not emit any supernatural heat. "It seems our target is still quite far," Lancelot explained to his companions. "Let's check out that fortress first." Chapter 148. On their way to the Instant Fortress, Ekmund had shared much knowledge about the owners of this fortress, the Doom Guard. The Doom Guard is one of the many factions in Mark City, and speaking of Mark City, one must explain the structure of the multiverse. To put it simply, there are 3 types of planes in the multiverse: the inner layer, the prime material plane, and the outer layer. Their current location, the bottomless abyss, where demons live in the 9 hells, and the barrens where Mark City is situated, all belong to the outer layer. As there is an outer layer, naturally, there is an inner layer. The inner layer consists of various elemental planes, including the earth elemental plane, fire elemental plane, the plane of positive and negative energy, etc. The base materials of the world indeed originate from the inner layer, while the ether realm connects the inner layer with the prime material plane. The prime material plane, also known as the transitional plane, is the plane of mortals, and also the homeland plane of Lancelot, Bruto, and the others. Here, materials from the inner layer and wills from the outer layer collide and combine, forming a myriad of races and worlds. Although the prime material plane appears to host countless worlds, it is generally believed that they are all situated within the same plane, merely separated by vast distances. Meanwhile, the outer layer is inhabited by gods and fiends, along with worshippers, mortal residents, and various other creatures. Although it might be hard to comprehend, the thoughts, desires, and emotions in the minds of mortals from the prime material plane directly shape the various outer layer planes, with some deities even born purely because believers wished for their existence. This is why many of the known areas of the outer layer are larger than all of the prime material planes combined. After all, human imagination is limitless. All the significant outer layers have clear factional tendencies, such as Barto Hell being lawfully evil and the wild fields being chaotically good. Another argument is, because of these clear factional tendencies, these planes are considered important. The environments and creatures of different planes vary greatly due to their factional differences. Here, the concepts of good and evil, order and chaos, previously residing only in the minds of mortals, have taken physical form and they fight to the death. So, if you must draw a map of the outer layer, Mark City is indeed right at the conceptual center, but only in a conceptual sense. On one side is the chaotically evil bottomless abyss, and on the other side is the lawfully good seven heavens. Naturally, Mark City can only be placed in the middle. But do not be mistaken, being at the conceptual center does not equate to being the center of the multiverse. One bottomless abyss is probably larger than all other planes combined, and some secretive planes wouldn't even appear on a map. Moreover, Mark City is not exactly the most flourishing place in the universe. People from opposing factions meeting in Mark City without fighting is fortunate enough, and such a fragile order is maintained thanks to Mark City's mysterious mistress, the Lady of Pain. The reason she is described as mysterious is that most people who have seen her are dead. The few lucky enough to have seen her and lived are curled up in the shadows, tremblingly whispering about the horrors of the Lady of Pain. However, the Lady of Pain does not rule like a mundane sovereign. She never makes any demands of Mark City's residents, nor deigns to communicate with anyone. People merely find out what she dislikes through those unfortunate enough to be killed by her, with one of the most important rules being, do not publicly discuss the Lady of Pain, nor even mention her name slightly louder than a whisper. But no one could deny that this cold and ruthless lady was guarding Mark City, and it was because of her that divine powers, abyssal lords, and archdukes were kept at bay, and angels, demons, and fiends who came here all behaved, at least outwardly. The operation of the city was maintained by 15 factions, or at least some of them attempted to maintain the operation of the city. These factions were both political and philosophical, each having its own perspective on the future of the universe, the fate of mortals, and the ultimate truth. Some factions believed that life was full of various sufferings, and only true death could offer eternal relief. Others believed that souls, through continuous self-improvement in the cycle of reincarnation, would eventually reach the peak of mortal existence and become divine powers. Still, another faction believed that every sinner should receive fair punishment from the gods, and their task was to send each guilty soul to face divine judgment, typically achieved by ending the lives of sinners. The faction known as the Doomguard believed that decay was the ultimate fate of the entire multiverse, the ultimate release from toil and pain. The meaning of guard in their name was also very clear. They guarded the onset of this ultimate decay, preventing any fool from trying to delay or reverse the process. Of course, if they could help hasten this ultimate decay, it would be even better. Therefore, their cooperation with the demons was very pleasant. Doomguard made battleships, weapons, and armor for the demons, asking in return only that the demons use these items to cause as much destruction as possible. As long as there were profits to be made, the demons were naturally happy to maintain this cooperative relationship. But do not think that the Doomguard was an inherently evil organization. They merely believed that ultimate decay equaled ultimate liberation, and they coincidentally shared this goal of world destruction with the demons. So when a group of people passed through the broken city walls and entered the fortress interior, far from being attacked, a guard approached them, asking about their intentions for the visit and whether they needed any help, though his tone sounded utterly devoid of enthusiasm. Following Ekman's suggestion, Lancelot claimed they were a group of mercenaries, wanting to procure some weapons and equipment. The guard directed them to the armory, informing them where to find a bar and the inn. Once the guard had left, the group naturally headed straight for the bar. Anywhere in the world, if you're confident in handling any unwelcome provocation, a bar is still the best place to learn about an unfamiliar location. Walking east along the broken city walls for a short distance, the group quickly arrived at a district filled with bars and shops. Patting the storage bag containing his gold coins, Lancelot led his companions to the largest, and seemingly least run-down bar. From the outside, the bar appeared to be 4 stories tall, each floor spanning more than 3,000 square feet. According to the sign, the name of the bar was the Desiccated Rose. All the windows of the bar were tightly shut, with only a open for business sign on the door indicating that the bar was expecting guests. Chapter 149. Pushing open the solid and heavy door, made of some unknown wood, Lancelot was the first to stride in. The interior of the tavern was in better shape than its exterior appearance seemed to suggest. The spacious hall was divided into 3 smaller halls, one was a bar, one was a dining room, and another was the inn's front desk. Since all the windows were closed, although it was daytime, candles were lit everywhere in the tavern. However, the light from those candles was so faint that it barely illuminated a third of the space. At the entrance of the tavern stood 2 guards, perhaps bouncers would be more appropriate, the one on the left with dark skin, solid muscles, a protruding chin, and sharp fangs stretching from the corners of his mouth was a half-orc, the other one with reddish-brown skin, a sloping forehead, and an enormous nose was a goblin, the disciplined and powerful cousin of Phil. Aside from the orcs' inherent dislike for elves and the goblins for dwarves, the 2 guards did not obstruct the fully armed Lancelot and his companions. Like most taverns, the guards were there to protect their employer's property and other employees. If a fight broke out in the tavern, they would only stand aside with their arms crossed, perhaps helping to protect the defenseless furniture, and after everything had ended, they would throw out the bodies of the losers. The group approached the bar, where a Typhloin, sporting a pair of backward curving horns on his head, with purplish-red skin, and an aging appearance, was enthusiastically greeting them from behind the counter. "Welcome to the Dry Rose, travelers. I am Agamemnon, the owner of this tavern," he said with a very professional smile. "What would you like to drink? Our selection of beverages is quite extensive, ranging from beers as light as water to strong spirits that could knock Barthez on his back. Or perhaps you are hungry. Our signature dish is the Fespern Fireball Spicy Meat Sauce Sandwich, guaranteed authentic flavor. If you dislike spicy food, we have plenty more to choose from. Here's the menu, take your pick." "Thank you." Lancelot took the menu and casually asked, "Do you have any rooms available?" "Yes, but only 2 royal suites are left, 100 gold coins a night." The Typhloin proprietor's smile grew even more radiant. "Can't help it, too many people have recently flooded into this fortress, all eager to witness the grace of the succubus Paladin." Lancelot was taken aback by the owner's words. By controlling his breath, he managed to keep his facial expression calm, but the obviously startled reactions of his companions ruined any attempt to feign ignorance. "The story of that succubus Paladin does sound quite interesting," Lancelot said half in earnest, half in jest. "We came here to visit the famous armory in this fortress, but it would be nice to catch a glimpse of what a tannery paladin looks like as well. What could be more interesting than a combination of a succubus and a paladin?" Agamemnon's face showed a mocking smile. "Not a single deity would accept her allegiance, which goes to show most deities are also fools. With such a charming person in the church, I suppose qualifications for new believers would have to be obtained through a lottery. The most up-to-date noves are published on Fruit Noello. True believers must worship their deities from the heart, and believers attracted by beauty are meaningless," Alamir countered unhappily, but as a priest of the Fiery Lady, his words didn't carry much persuasion. "Perhaps the gods haven't even noticed this little succubus yet," Lancelot shrugged. "We can't stay here forever. Do you know when this succubus paladin is supposed to come?" "Ah, of course I know, and there's plenty of other insider information too." Typhloin's eyes narrowed slyly. "Where her escort is coming from, approximately when they'll arrive, and which big shots are in the escort party, I happen to know all that. What do you say, are you interested?" "I'm more interested in who would need that information." Lancelot leaned back slightly. "And why a tavern owner would be in possession of it?" "A tavern owner, of course, has a rich source of information." Agamemnon's lips curled up noticeably. As for who would need this information, naturally, it would be those who wish to claim this succubus paladin. "A succubus like Elithisia, that's her name. This piece of information is free. Such a demoness supposedly makes a highly precious sacrifice. Rumors say that sacrificing her can grant immense power, power great enough to promote a berserk demon into a Barlow flame demon. You can imagine how many forces are eyeing her." "Is that so?" Lancelot feigned a bit of interest. "But she seems of little use to us mortals, doesn't she?" "Oh, but of course, she is useful, great mercenary sir." The tavern owner Typhloin had now completely assumed the role of a salesman. He pulled out a stack of parchments from under the table. "Take a look at these bounties. Batizo, a retired blood war general, Promises 200,000 gold coins to anyone who brings him that succubus. Odinash, the Lady of Change, has put up a bounty of 100,000 gold coins, along with the right to choose any item from her collection. The Lord of the Broken Realm, the Blood-Red Shroud, is only willing to pay 30,000 gold coins for her succubus kin, but she promises to fulfill any fantasy one may have of her once. If money doesn't mean much to you, perhaps this might be the most attractive offer. She's worth that much. Lancelot put on a show of being shocked, then mockingly regained his composure. But how much do you plan to sell this information for? And how can I be sure that your sources are reliable? Your skepticism is understandable, but think about it. If I give true information, you either return satisfied or get killed on the spot. Only if I give you false information, causing you to waste your time, do you get the chance to come back and trouble me. And my business is right here, it won't grow legs and run away. Agamemnon tried to make his words sound as persuasive as possible, but Lancelot stared straight into the tavern owner's eyes, unmoved. The latter suddenly felt that there seemed to be something else in the eyes of this human knight, a terribly horrific, ferocious entity that seemed to be watching him through those pale blue eyes, as if the next lie would invoke that terrible power to tear him to shreds. What Lancelot had employed was a small divine skill of spiritual cultivators, the heart-capturing technique, which could intimidate ordinary people with weak spiritual power with his gaze. But when coupled with the true chi from the spiritual energy of the abyss, the effects seemed unexpectedly potent. Chapter 150. I have no reason to lie to you. Agamemnon couldn't help but reveal his true thoughts. You look well equipped and experienced enough to help me with the trouble in the sewers. As long as you do me this favor, I will tell you everything I know, and you'll have the right to free drinks in my tavern forever. Anyway, you'll soon die at the hands of demons, or some other mercenaries. I appreciate your honesty. Lancelot was about to say something profoundly insincere when Bruto excitedly jumped up and shouted. What? Free drinks? Lancelot rolled his eyes and decided he needed to teach Bruto how to avoid spoiling the mood. He turned to the somewhat stunned tavern owner, and spoke in a nonchalant tone that contrasted sharply with the dwarf's excitement. Tell us about your trouble. It's like this, the underground sewer of the fortress was built by the kobolds, and they did an excellent job, making the sewers both efficient and spacious. This sewer system has been functioning well for many years without any issues, until recently. Agamemnon sighed, zombies keep crawling into the cellar entrance, messing up my stock, who knows what's worse could come out from there. It seems you're not short of muscle willing to die for you. Lancelot glanced at the two guards. Although Hank and Gru are both stupid and greedy, I've got dirt on them, and finding two more guys like them around here isn't easy, the Typhloid proprietor whispered, glancing furtively at the door. It's not like I haven't hired some mercenaries or a few adventurers to take a look, but they either find nothing, or they never come back. Now I can only hire 2 mercenaries to guard the basement temporarily, and for that, I have to feed them well and pay them 20 gold coins a day. What about the Doom Guard? Aren't they supposed to deal with it? Bruto asked incredulously, this is their turf after all. Why would they care? The tavern owner looked at Bruto with disbelief. If it weren't for the fact that it doesn't benefit them at all, I would have thought they were behind this. What about your neighbors? Kola asked curiously. If the zombies are coming from the sewers, then all the buildings on this street should have the same problem. That's the thing. It seems that only I am having this problem, so I have reason to believe it's sabotage by a competitor. Agamemnon's hands were planted on the table, his long tail swinging restlessly behind him. How about it? You help me with my trouble, I give you the information you want. Sounds fair, doesn't it? And the free drinks, Bruto added. Oh, yes, of course, the tavern owner assured him, the best within 100 miles, guaranteed, not a drop watered down. I don't buy it, the dwarf crossed his arms, unless you can provide some samples for us to verify first. Half an hour later, Lancelot and his party were walking through the tunnels of the instant fortress. Despite people's impression of kobolds as weak and cowardly creatures that were somewhat evil but not to the extent of wanting to destroy the world, they also had tight-knit social groups and excellent digging skills. They, like dwarves and gnomes, could intuitively sense the conditions of soil and rock and use that to judge whether an area could bear weight or be tunneled through. The city's administrators could hire a tribe of kobolds with just some food and tools to dig out an elaborate and well-functioning sewage system beneath the streets. If you were willing to live peaceably with them, these kobolds would even dig smaller tunnels that only they could enter and settle in, regularly maintaining the sewage system to ensure that the entire city's drainage was unobstructed. However, these malevolent little fellows found it hard to restrain their jealousy towards the inhabitants above them, occasionally sneaking out to wreak havoc on the garbage heaps, leaving a mess behind, which made most residents wish they could get rid of these pests as soon as possible. If there was a problem with the sewage system one day, all they had to do was hire some more kobolds. There were plenty of them in the wilderness. The tunnel they were currently walking through was a creation of the kobolds. The tunnel was about 20 feet wide, with a 10-foot wide water channel in the middle, where slow-moving yellow-green sewage was carrying away the garbage from various buildings, and pathways on each side wide enough for 2 people to walk abreast. At the moment, the sewage was emanating a stinging stench, but Kola had just concocted a potion on the spot using some herbs and pepper powder, reducing the air's odor from suffocating to indescribable. "I haven't tasted authentic honey mead in a long time," Bruto observed his surroundings. "Although coming to this foul-smelling place for it doesn't seem quite worth it." "Don't mind that, dwarf," Alamir lifted his hardhead hammer, the magic weapon casting bright light around them. "We're mainly here for his information, not the free drinks." "Yeah, information," Bruto replied in a flustered tone, clearly having forgotten. "Lancelot, how much farther? We haven't gotten lost, have we?" "We are approaching the area where Agamemnon's men never returned." Lancelot consulted a parchment in his hands, which was a map provided by the tavern owner. "Everyone, stay alert. There's a strong sense of evil ahead." The elf priest stretched his neck. "Let's purge their vile nest. Seems like most of our adventures involve us crawling around underground." Bruto, shielding himself with a shield, led the group. "I bet this is the work of some demon who must be really pissed at this mortal fortress and is determined to destroy it." "Unlikely," Paladin shook his head, his neckline with an adaptation necklace making him, besides Ekmund, the one who was breathing the most comfortably. "This is clearly not the demon's style. They wouldn't pass up the chance to vent their destructive urges to a few zombies." "Then what could it be?" The dwarf was getting bored and started kicking pebbles along the path. "Could it be the legendary lich? Do you think a top-tier spellcaster like a lich would be so bored?" Ekmund bumped the dwarf's helmet irritably. "But it's definitely the work of someone who's mastered necromancy. Though filthy, the ventilation here is good, unlike the pit at Oasis Fort, which can gather enough negative energy to make corpses rise again." Just then, a pebble kicked by Bruto seemed to collide with some invisible barrier in mid-air and suddenly came to a halt. The dwarf was slightly startled when suddenly a cracking sound was heard from nowhere, and a rock larger than his head appeared, whistling towards the group from the front. "Watch this!" Bruto instantly reacted, raising the hammer that was always in his hand. "No!" Lancelot hurriedly spoke up to stop him, but the dwarf's hammer had already left his hand, smashing the rock into pieces with a whoosh.